You've got a destiny, somebody you're supposed to be. Far from this small town, there's answers waiting to be found. So she lies awake, thinking there's been some mistake. Crying her eyes out, begging for help. She's shouting, I want a new brain, I want a new heart. I'm sick of feeling, failing and falling apart.
Rise in mind.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Rise in mind.
Good morning, good morning.
Well, hello.
We have a very special show. If you don't know, if you haven't seen, there's another flannel gentleman here. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but yeah, we've got an old
flannelly
buddy
gentleman.
of the channel. Most of you fuckers wouldn't know because we deleted the episode. It was so profound.
Deleted
The
it.
Space Viking was like, the world's not ready for this. We got to strip it down a little bit. We got to edit this down because this is just too much knowledge. This was too deep on the dive. This guy's drill is sharp as fuck and ready to go.
I
But yeah.
appreciate the story, CP, but in truth, I just forgot to click download.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to, like, you fake it till you make it kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
they don't need to know shit. Like, you guys are like the kids. We're driving the car or the big Dodge Ram. Like, it's okay. We'll get there.
Don't make me turn this car around.
You don't need to know the condition dad's in getting there.
You kids need to calm down back there. Actually, Joe is an actual father.
Yeah.
Real certified.
Don't make me turn this metaphor around.
Yeah.
He's a real motherfucker. That's for damn sure.
So yes. So we do have with us main author. I like to call him a prolific author, Joseph Slater.
Whoa.
He is,
He
though.
is into you.
He creates. He creates so much stuff so quickly that my brain goes, that's prolific. He does all the stuff all the time. And well, for reference, I've been working on a novel for 8 years or so, and I'm up to like chapter 12, and I'm like, I'll finish it eventually. And in the time I've known Joe, I've worked on maybe 2 chapters of it, and Joe's released like 3 books since I've known him, and I'm like, wow.
Sounds like you just gotta lock yourself in a house with a bunch of kids and, like, I gotta get out of here. I can't leave though. Right.
My first book was written during nap time when my kids were younger.
See? That's what you gotta do, Viking. Just have a pile of kids and you'll write those books.
Yeah.
So
if it's
yeah,
not happening fast enough, you can just watch my kids for a weekend and get a lot of writing done.
Oh, yeah, that'd be. I'm sure I'd get a lot of writing done.
now he's like trying to be like, hey, this is a good opportunity for me to get kids out of here, actually. And I'm not gonna be doing any writing. I'm gonna kick it on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be like this guy kicking in the hot tub all weekend. But that's a Space Viking life, and that's what are you doing there, Space Viking?
What am I doing there?
Yeah. He was looking down at something.
Yeah, there we are, Storm. Welcome in. Thank you for coming in and hanging out.
Storm of Iron's here.
Hey, Storm of Iron.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I loved that. That was hype, dude. He was just like, hey.
That's the Space
Storm
Viking
of
life,
Iron.
brother. Now,
We're always happy to have the storm rolling in, right?
CP, you got to get on Facebook Messenger so you can come in our group chat with Storm of Iron. we got a special
I am
club
on
there.
You know I'm on there. I have a site that was a joke that I created as an art identity that actually became probably the Trent identity, and I'm not gonna say who it is because I don't want people to find it. I just need to go in that pig pen every once in a while and find out if an organization I've done something with has put the posts on. But I don't want to hang out in the crabs in the buckets that is Facebook, and nothing good happens on Facebook, guys. Realize it.
But how are you going to keep in touch with your boomer normie relatives?
Drive to their fucking house like boomers would do. Like, go outside and be like, hey, person.
Go up at their house.
Yeah, give him a call. Oh, Inky's jumping around the back.
Mhm.
I mean, my friend said it well. I gave up a certain aspect of internet, social media, and it happened when we had. I don't even want to get into it, but it just happened during a political season that was just too outrageous for me to even deal with the reality that what we had become a
Yeah.
world. And I go, I'm done. I'm done. No blue, no red, no side. I'm fucking done. And I can't watch this anymore. And half of it's just
Yeah.
bullshit.
So-
And
we're gonna do
so I
a.
stepped.
I'm gonna stop you right there, CP. We're gonna go down a whole road if we go down that road.
No,
we
we're not
can't
going
do
down a
that.
whole road. I'm just saying I jumped out of the pig pen because I don't
Well,
ever want to talk about
Look,
politics.
we just want you to get on the messenger. You don't have to. We're not asking you to hang out on Facebook. That'd be great. Yeah, Facebook does have crabs. So I'm
Dude,
sorry, I
I've seen these
couldn't
message
leave that
threads.
alone.
You're gonna wake me up at 11 o'clock for someone with some bullshit. Is what's gonna happen. Someone's gonna be like, in the mess. Okay,
Oh.
I've seen what's in these messenger threads. Nothing gets done in the messenger threads.
Everything gets done in the messenger
Nothing gets
threads.
done, dude. It gets done
CP,
here on Rise and Mind.
How was your week, CP? How's things going?
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
No. I'm gonna take like 2 seconds to celebrate some accomplishments. And you can go on the CP Sketch Instagram, maybe Dreamers Arcade. Look those guys up. They're essentially me. Rise and Mind podcast. So usually it's like me liking my own stuff. They're my imaginary friends. Dreamers Arcade hangs out with Rise and Mind, CP Sketch. It's becoming an issue. I don't think CP Sketch likes Dreamers Arcade, and I don't think Dreamers Arcade likes Rise and Mind. So we're gonna have some beef coming up. So get ready for that.
Beef.
No, I'm just fucking around. The weekend was great. We suggested a local fair for the area as a way to have a signature event on this regarding this group that I work with for the betterment of the downtown area. And so Abso, my wife of all people, were like, bring back this fair. And we were looking into renting like Ferris wheels. You know what those things cost? Any idea what rich kid's gonna get for his birthday for a day?
What, a fair? An entire fair?
I don't know, like just the Ferris wheel.
Just
Like
the
if you were
Ferris
to rent
wheel.
one for a day.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what that would cost?
At least $5.
At least
Two. For one day.
one day.
I want to say for one day. The setup alone, the labor, it's got to be like $2,000.
Okay.
Like I'm thinking around $2,000 for a day.
Our minimum we found was 4,000,
Oh.
and then we found it going all the way up to 15,000. It was crazy, dude.
Damn.
And we're like, no, that's not going to happen. But then we found this one fair that would just set up, and then we can get a percentage of the tickets. And so we needed a certain percentage to clear security, because unfortunately, when you get police to protect and serve, that you got to pay overtime, $75 an hour, and so it gets quite expensive. So we were in charge of security, but we needed to make at least 3. And we did, and we made money on top of that. It was a huge success.
That's fantastic.
And then me and my buddy, the director, I convinced this fucking guy to dress up as Killer Clowns from Outer Space, to spend some of the the downtown budget on Killer Clowns costumes from Spirit Halloween. And we went around the fair dressed as Killer Clowns, and we promoted a big Halloween event, which hey, guess what? It's the end of the month. It's October. It's that creepy horror season, which is going to lead us into some of the discussion today.
It's that Creeposaurus season.
But we're able to promote that event, and then on top of that, we made a bunch of money. And then Monday, I got approved for that mural. So I have a big mural project starting next week. Congrats. Yeah, a paid gig. And you're going to be really excited about some of the content that I put on the wall. It's going to be really on brand, I'll
We've
say.
got in the Rise of Mine share, CP and sorry, what was his name?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's Mike.
Yeah,
That's my buddy Mike.
I feel like
Look at these.
if you guys want to see what CP's talking about, like in pure end of September fashion, they dressed up as killer clowns from outer space.
Yeah, we went a couple rounds. We went
That's
once
good.
during the day, and then we went Saturday night, and it was a little bit more. I think we were harassed a little bit by
Yeah.
some youths, but
They are in this
so
picture.
so that was a fun time. And then oh yeah, play that picture of Mike right there. Okay, there's me and Mike, but play that other one. And if you're playing sound, it's I don't know if you'll get demaka'd by "It's a
No.
Wonderful World." That's I don't know if that's
can't.
public domain.
I can't do sound. No, it's that's a different song, but that's okay. Oh, this
Oh
one?
no, the clown one, that's Killer Clowns. And then go to the one with Mike just wearing that hat. He won it at the fair.
It's
It's like-
ridiculous.
This is what I have to cheer myself up with every once in a while.
Yeah.
This is the greatest thing ever.
So that's awesome.
So that's my buddy
you're working on
that I work with.
You're working on a mural. I understand it
So
is
that-
this one here that you're touching up, or no? You already did this one. You touched up this
Dude,
one.
no. I'm doing the touch up on that. And I'm working on a new mural that's going to be up on the street.
Okay.
And I'm building a whole Sleepy Hollow display in the park,
Yeah.
and then I'm building a micro version of that in a window display. It's gonna be nuts.
Okay.
So we've got all this. So I'm gonna be working on 2 murals. I'm gonna be working on a giant Halloween display. So October, look for lots of stuff popping up.
Fantastic.
And then on top of that, we've had quarry problems. Speaking of mining.
Mhm.
And then Abso got really sick, so we haven't had a chance to really celebrate all these accomplishments. So that's why I kind of bring them up today. I was at a meeting for the mural being approved, and then I got a text like they extended the moratorium for 6 months to
Fantastic.
define everything. And then the fucking guy who I was pretty sure was not on the up and up resigned from the position of the head. So it's like it all is falling apart, and it's going like everything within 2 days. It was like, yeah, winner. CP has the big dinner,
Oh,
and I'm eating it up, dude.
You're winning.
But
Yeah.
ebbs
That's
and
awesome.
flows, my friend.
I'm glad to
You gotta
hear
be
that
out
things
there.
are going well for you.
Thanks. You got to be out there with boots on the ground, and you can't be worried about like the bullshit that you hear on social media where it's like, I hope nobody paints over it. It's like, dude, they do paint over it. People vandalize them all the time. You know why you don't know that shit? Because they drive over there and fix it. Like,
Yeah.
people need to understand his responsibility out there. Like,
Yeah, it's true.
don't, if you're worried about everything, like, oh, they're going to come in and ruin it. They are.
They will.
Well, like
I mean,
somebody. Yeah,
Somebody
yeah.
who doesn't like you on a personal level could go into Amazon and bomb my reviews too.
Yep.
Yeah,
So that's what I'm gonna have to take.
yeah. It's like it's just part of the resilience you have to build up being a creator, putting something in the public, and being vulnerable. And it's like, well, not everything's for everybody. And then think about it. We were all horsing around at points in our lives, especially when we were younger, and some jackass things. And there was like some foam gravestones kicked like last Halloween, and that could have just been anybody. And then, but for me, I was like, okay, kick my gravestone. I took it apart. I took the broken pieces, put them all back together, did a new paint job on it, dry wash, added pieces to it. The Mike there, he goes, man, I wish they'd kicked all the gravestones because it looked so much better. And that's just what I do. Like, if you're gonna fuck my shit up, I'm actually gonna fix it and bring it out better. Wreck it again, I'll just keep bringing it out better, because you can't stop betterment if people just don't stop. If they're committed to doing things positive, then you can't just lay down and let the steamroller roll over you. You can be out there and you deal with the negative reviews or the vandalism. Don't worry about it. It's just part of the deal. We're all just ambassadors here for a short time, and it could all be painted over tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to leave something, better. Leaving it better than how I found it, essentially, when I'm done.
So
And
Joe,
sharing your own personal experiences, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe, what do you have cooking? Speaking of wins and creative work.
Well, let's just
right now,
let's do a general introduction.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Like what you got cooking. Have we even said who this is?
Good. I said it's.
Okay.
I said
just-
we said we didn't introduce ourselves.
Oh, you guys know who I am. CP of the Dreamers
We
Arcade.
introduced Joe, but we didn't introduce us. So
Look at this.
we actually have
Look
just
at-
got a new follower too. Thank you so much for that follow.
Hey, fuck yeah, dude. You're kicking ass.
I'm Matt Crafton, aka Space Viking 42. We have with us, as always, my co-host CP Sketch of Dreamers Arcade, and we have with us Joe Slater.
Joseph D. Slater. Janie
Who wrote
is a
Janie,
novel that I have.
who wrote
Yep.
Vacation Planet.
And he
Vacation
has
Planet 2.
tons of these. He's a very
Dragons in the Sky.
prolific. I'll use that word. Dragons in the Sky.
Dragons in the Sky.
What's that about?
It's
called In the Sky.
In the Sky. Sorry.
My third novel. I wrote a book about. It's a cross between sky pirates, dragon riders, and like a spy conspiracy. And it's like a flintlock, not quite steampunk, but more of a flintlock style. And that was pretty fun to write. Basically, I designed these airships in like an old fantasy style, but on each of these ships, they have rows of dragon riders and dragons, and they kind of come out of these ships the same way that bi-wings would come out of a World War I Zeppelin, and they had huge aerial battle scenes that were pretty fun to write. That's
cool.
In the Sky. That one. I think, as far as fun factor goes for writing and creating something, I just had simply the most good, clean fun writing that one.
Oh yeah, it sounds like such a fun story, and I've read a good chunk of the first chapter. As we've talked about before, like I find like actually sitting down and reading a book very difficult in the last like 10 years of my life. I've had so much trouble with it, but because I do so much traveling, I've gotten to listen to the Vacation Planet and the Vacation Planet 2 all the way through while going places. And
Oh, so you have audiobooks available too?
yes.
Yeah. So
That might help.
I have 2 out of 3 books written in the series trilogy called
Nice.
the Vacation Planet series. Essentially, I got the idea from a 10-second Rick and Morty clip where the Sanchez family comes back to Earth, and these aliens have become huge tourists there. So they're walking by with I Love Earth on their T-shirts and stuff. And I thought, that would be a really interesting story if I went that route. And it ended up being my first published piece. It's like a cyberpunk setting with aliens that come to Earth, and they crowd humans into these cyberpunk cities. And they turn the rest of the Earth into like a vacation hotspot. And these aliens are called the tourists, and they're quite notorious to the humans. And without spoiling too much, the two books so far that I've published are a small handful of humans who are trying to fight back against that system in place, and both of those are currently on Audible.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that option just because Viking brings up a good point. It is really hard. Like I still have to read Janie. I read some of the intro of it, and just to get a feel for your writing, which I did enjoy, and I liked. It was like pulling me in the story. Like but it's so hard to sit down. The winter is like when I try to do all this stuff, but yeah, to sit down to read, to watch a show, it's really tough. But audio is great when you're moving around as much as we are.
Yeah, audiobooks pretty much sell themselves too. Whenever I'm at an event, someone says something along those lines of, I just simply don't have the focus to sit down and read a paperback. But you can say, well, how much time do you spend in the car? And usually, New Englanders, they can spend between 20 minutes and half an hour in the car on their way to and from work.
Easily.
Each of these books are between 5 and 7 hours long, so you can get through them pretty quickly. And I'm told that they're fast reads. That's just something that very positive people in my life have told me about them. So, and I'm really honored to hear that Matt finished the second book. Also, I know that he finished the first one, but I couldn't remember if you listened to the second one.
So the
But
second
after he
one,
did that.
just as if you need more praise, there was one night I was driving home from visiting a friend, or it was a convention, I can't remember which, where it was actually raining pretty hard, and I was going through a town, and like some sort of event was going on, and there were just lights everywhere, and there was a particular scene I was listening to in the book that was describing that very same feeling, and I felt like I was there. It's like, this is so cool.
So he got the full immersion experience of that. Cool.
I got the Vacation Planet 2 4D experience.
Nice, dude. I like the title because we're you said New England, and we're from the same area up here in the great state of Maine, as they call it. But the we're named Vacation Land.
Yep.
And
Good eye.
it really, like, when I heard that, and like just tourism, and knowing I've done a lot of seasonal work. I've worked for a lot of people with camps and whatnot, and
Mhm.
it's a thing that stabilizes our community, but it also creates like a weird dynamic for like half the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I grew up in a tourist town, so a lot of the ideas for it just kind of came to me.
We love you, tourists, but it's just a culture thing, man. It's weird, huh?
Oh,
Yeah.
the tourists in Vacation Planet are not loved.
No, they're not.
Not at all.
No. In fact, if you do associate with a tourist, it's like you're putting your life on the line kind of thing. It's
Ooh,
very risky too.
Yeah.
look out,
It's like a
camp
Yeah.
owners.
correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like like they know what they're doing. They know that they're stealing a planet from a whole nother race just to
I think it's not whether or not they know it. I think it's more they don't care.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, they're they're indifferent to the suffering of the planet they're inhabiting.
Yeah.
They're like, no,
Yeah,
we need
because
this.
they have a different overall. I mean, I haven't read it, but I'm getting the vibe, like knowing how tourists act. It is tough because some people are very, very nice, very kind, and they're very respectful of coming up here. It's like them coming up to their paradise, and they're really grateful. But then there's some people you could just get that vibe from. It's just like, yeah, I don't have time to fuck with this. Oh, my shit's falling apart. Like, why don't you take care of it? It's like, well, you only come here like a couple weeks out of the year, and you're being neglectful. It's like, oh, I'm going back to Dubai and shit. And it's like, what the fuck? Where are you guys like
Why are
right
you-
now? And they're just so detached, and they don't give a shit.
Why
It's
are
just
you
like a
visiting-
playground when they come up here.
If you can afford to go to Dubai, why are you bringing your
Dude,
your gross ass?
they
up
go
to
everywhere,
Maine?
man. 'Cause
Yeah,
they can-
these could be full blown houses that the three of us could live in for the rest of our lives.
Oh,
But
yeah.
these are
Yeah.
just like weekend getaway homes that take up the whole coastline.
Where I
They're
grow
doll
up-
houses.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just like little doll houses.
Yeah, I used to do pest control, and the region that I worked with was my territory was on the mid coast. So like Brunswick and Hallowell and Orr's Island and Bailey's Island and
Oh yeah,
Squirrel Island. All these.
those places.
Yeah. I I won't break some kind of discretion with who my clients were, but some of them were really important people, and the callousness that they have to making these huge differences was that affects all the locals is just oh, that's too bad, they're just going to have to deal with it kind of mentality. And it's
Yeah.
really a shame because these are people that you're meeting who are like celebrities and stuff, and you're like, yeah, I really wish that you respected it a little more. I mean, I don't care that you have a house here. I care that it's becoming a problem for other people, though.
We did record
Yeah,
an entire
I've heard
episode.
those stories. Yeah.
Not to go down that
Yeah.
route though. I basically pick and chose, uh, it just kind of came to me. Growing up in a tourist town where the population year round is like 380, and in the summertime it goes to like 3,000. You get it's really easy to just feel how different it is. Like you don't really feel like you're in your own state during the summertime sometimes.
Yeah.
And, so it wasn't really difficult for me to draw direct lines to what the tourists are doing to the locals on Earth in this book series.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to plan book 3. Originally, the first book was supposed to be a standalone. Uh, Fortunately, people liked it enough to ask me for a sequel, but I had planned on writing it into a series. So writing it into a series was such a mind-bending experience. Oftentimes, I felt very stressed out because I need to reacquaint myself with the laws and rules and all of those things that come along with the first book. And I'm like, oh man, I have to become my own biggest fan just so I can
Oh yeah.
touch base with all these things again. So I wrote book 2, and Matt, as someone who isn't as close to the project I am, I hope that the flow from the first book to the second one was not so jarring. Anyways,
It was flawless. It definitely felt like I don't know if either of you have played Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah, just re-downloaded it actually.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah.
in Grand Theft Auto 5, the story
It's the one story I beat.
it'll jump around from 3 different characters, and
I love it.
when it jumps, you definitely know it's a different character, it's a different feel, and it's a whole different like life that they're living, but the sort of flavor doesn't change because it's still Grand Theft Auto, and it felt very similar to jumping from those characters to jumping from book to book for
Okay, cool.
Hunters in the Rain. Like it felt like, oh, this is the same world. They're dealing with the same stuff, but these are different characters in a different part of the world with their own lives. And I actually loved it. I loved it more because of that. Like it wasn't jarring.
Cool.
It was actually a better experience. I felt like when you do a sequel, it should expand on the first one, not just continue the story. So I feel like not
Yeah.
only did you continue like the intensity and like where the story was going, but you also created a new story with new characters in the same world while still keeping the same like here's what was happening in the last book and these are the ramifications of that and how it's playing out. That was like brilliant.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I if you'd like I haven't read any of this stuff, but if you'd like my 2 cents, a suggestion moving forward with other books in the series, there's 2 things that are a little bit being exacerbated right now in the state is heavy move for industrialization, whether it be quarries, pits, solar farms, and there's that dynamic you can get into it, like how the industry and how that impacts the land, and then how that works around these people who are the tourists, right? And then of course the power goes to where they live anyway. So
Yeah.
it's like Maine has always been a colony state, and like there's that side. But the one thing that would really apply is Airbnb, buddy. That's the biggest concern right now. That tourists are going to Airbnb all these camps that they stay in for 2 weeks out of the year, and then there's going to be people there every day. What would that do to a lake when every camp's full all the time, using sewage, water, like tourists making money on top of tourists? And then of course they're getting more rich, but it's like literally all this stuff is destroying the state for the sake of these worlds. And it'll all come back to bite them in the ass in the end. But there are 2 things that I've noticed moving forward, being in my line of work, that are very problematic. And I'm saying this as someone who's done carpentry, who works with people that make crushed stone and stuff, and I understand the importance of these industries, but when they're like being put in the residential areas of the people that still live here, far away from the tourists, and we're getting our water taken away and destroyed, and then like these, and then it's being shipped down to them. It's like, what does that make us? You know, like it's, I don't know if there are characters who are living the struggle there in Vacation Planet around these tourists and
Yeah,
how that would impact
Didn't you
them.
touch
and
on the the like hotel situation and like how tourists would stay in the cities sometimes just to see what humans are up to and treat them like zoo animals almost?
yeah,
People
yeah,
watch, right?
yeah. In the first one, the characters are pretty low on the totem pole as far as social, socially. The the three characters in the first book are all these mercenaries, and they are pretty morally gray on a lot of stuff. If you're willing to pay them, then they'll do it. They don't really care if it's shady or not, but as long as you're paying them, they'll protect you or the goods you're transporting, that kind of deal. And then they discover a plot from one of the tourists, and the plot is to just extinguish the remaining cities because they're creating so much pollution. You know, you have all those people in one spot in just a few cities around the world. That creates some pretty bad pollution and that stuff. So, in order to, maintain the beauty of their little um, vacation planet, if you will, they have to, remove these humans, and the characters, when they discover this plot, they have to do something that's higher than themselves. It's not a matter of, what has the paycheck at that point. At that point is putting humanity above your own personal needs. And then I kind of revisit that in book two, but in a different way, or at least I feel like I did it in a different way in book two. Um, One of the things that I got for feedback from book one was how the consistent feedback I get with my books that I have very character-driven stories, and I'm honored by that. But at the same time, I need to remember to build on the world a little bit more. So I try to build on the world in book two a little bit more. The thing that makes this tricky is world building is supposed to be a book one thing. So as I did it, I tried to sprinkle it in the way that I did in the sky. In the sky, you don't really know how big the world is until it comes up in conversation, because it's not necessarily relevant unless it's, coming up in conversation. So, or conversation or an event. So I was like, okay, so I need to build this world in a world that's already been established, and I need to kind of explain things a little bit more in detail. Like, I didn't even name the city in the first one. I had to more or less, sneak in, what people called that city in book two. And then I kind of established, all right, so America is the only previous country to actually have two cities in the same uh, previous country. Like, there's no border lines anymore. So there's one in around Niagara Falls. There's another one in Seattle. Another one in another major huge one in China. Another one in Russia. That kind of deal. And I had to explain this without feeling like hey guys, so I know that I was supposed to establish all these things in book one, but in book two, we're going to build the world. And that was really hard to do. So what I did is I created these two characters who were so high up on the scale as far as social class goes that they can say, "Oh yeah, well, I've been to the Russian city. No one travels between these cities, but we can because we can afford to." And that's kind of my way of introducing more of the world. As far as I try to do it, and also keep those cities relevant too. So it's not like, "Oh, hello, reader. Did you know that there are 7 other cities, and 3 of them were destroyed in history?" Like, you have to phrase it very specifically, so you're not just dumping it on these readers. So
Yeah, I think
the
that's
way,
good. I like
thank
that.
you. So what I did was to catch the reader up, if it's been a while since they read the first one, I overlap the stories a little bit. So the ending of the first book doesn't happen until about 5 chapters in to book 2. So this shows you these 2 other characters, Grim and Wendigo, and these guys are hitmen. And this doesn't really spoil anything, so I'll say it. So these guys used to be street urchins. They lived off of scraps and barely got by in the streets, and were beat up by all the adults in their life. And there was one guy by the name of Rapture who took them under his wing, and this guy is kind of a mysterious past, but you learn that he's able to teach these guys how to fight and assassinate people and become these cold-blooded killers. And as a result, these guys have become very high up on the upper end of town. And it's funny because I enjoyed at the beginning of this describing how these guys are both street urchins, at heart, but now they live around these really high class people, and these people who haven't had the same history with needing to kill someone for food that these guys have had. And so they'll be in like this upscale market where there's a bunch of Karens yelling at their butlers, and these guys are just like, yeah, I'm going to eat. I know I'm in like a high-end market, but I'm going to eat basically street food because that's the comfort item. So
I love that.
it was a lot of fun to build the world without just saying, hey guys, these guys are street urchins. And now they live in a new neighborhood. So let's see what happens next.
So,
I
oh my god, I keep
tried to
picturing, like,
have them react to the way that I grew up on a little bit on the lower end of finances growing up.
Yeah.
And so
Rise in mind. That's where we are,
Yeah,
bitch.
it's actually a pretty
So-
big theme of the podcast. So I love that. I love that.
And I
feeling.
loved what you're saying, because it's I don't know how much Viking is going to take a lot of this for his writing or what he's working on now, but mine is heavily ingrained in the struggle of being on the bottom tier, being the poor guy, and what that demand is and how difficult that is. And I think it's very relatable.
When you're really poor, the things that you normalize that are like, this is just how I live, and then you hang out with rich kids or something growing up, and you're like, oh my god, like I'm like these guys don't have to try for anything, and they're like they have everything at their house and that kind of stuff.
And it changes your perspective too. Like, I have this conversation. I had a text thread with another friend. She grew up in the same kind of financial situation, and then like we moved more through our partners into like middle class. And it was an awkward transition because there were just such things that were normalized. But we'd send each other every once in a while, like, what did the rich kids have,
Yeah.
And it's stupid, the stuff like tar driveway, garage, swimming pool, like lawn.
Oh my god, swimming pools? That like you're not a baller unless you have a swimming pool.
Yeah, it was crazy, like the stuff that they like beanbag chairs, like just weird shit that I'd be like, oh, whoa, that kid's made it. And it's not really like crazy stuff, but it's just you take for granted. Like,
Can I change the subject real fast?
oh, you want to stay on schedule, Dad?
No,
okay.
I found something interesting, and I need to ask Joe's permission. There's an image of your face in a coffee cup, Joe. Can I show this on the podcast?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, just wanted to make sure because
this guy's tangential.
No, this is so fitting for what's going on. I'm like, oh, what is this? I don't know why I didn't see this before. And you're sure? Sure I can share this?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't care.
Okay.
What are you nude in it?
No,
Yeah,
he's in a coffee cup. I feel like we were having one of those silly moments.
Yeah.
You're like, good morning, everyone. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm about ready to be in a coffee cup now.
Yeah.
That's great. But sorry to throw you guys off.
Okay.
We're very much about the struggle, like the everyman, the working man, the working class.
What the fuck is that?
That's what I'm saying.
Are you singing?
He's in a coffee cup.
What are you singing?
I don't remember.
You have to go check it out on his page there.
Wow, I
I
didn't
don't
see
wanna,
that.
I don't
That's
want to break
that's
the
some.
rhythm of the conversation more by throwing sound into it, so I'm not going to turn it on right now. But it's just so cool.
You should just
Thank
put
you for
this.
letting us
You should just put
share
this
that.
over his fucking window for the rest of the show. It'll match up enough. Whenever he talks, like one of those, like filters there.
Yep.
No,
Oh, that's rad, dude. But no, I like
so
that
that
you.
scene.
I'm interested in reading this what do you call it? Vacation Planet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Instead of
That sounds
Vacation
cool,
Land,
man.
it's Vacation Planet. I never
And
picked that up until now.
well,
I don't live there.
you're not dealing with the weirdest of the weird over here. CP's over here. You think he's pulling like, oh, this is this coffee cup. Like I'm nebulously threading together so much crap. I don't know how I ever come back to reality.
So, outside of the Vacation Planet, I wrote Janie, which is the thing you were holding up.
The
Yeah.
Thing. This is a book that I got at a convention. Where were we? BCTC like
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
TBC?
BCTC.
that was this no, that wasn't BCT. That was the one in Portland, right?
Portland. That's right. That was in Portland.
He goes,
BCBD.
this fucking guy writes in my book.
This guy.
This is what he writes in my book. He goes, you small dick motherfucker, you're never gonna write as good as me. I'm JD Big Dick Slater. I was like, what? No, he didn't. He goes, hope you enjoy. He's very humble. What's in yours? What's in yours? What do you write in yours? Probably nothing, dude.
What does mine say?
Probably nothing. Like,
Mine-
hi Matt from Joe.
Mine-
Good year. Good year, Matt.
Mine doesn't
Good
even
hanging
have,
out.
Mine doesn't even have a signature, man.
Nah, dude.
Because
You don't do shit.
I have what's called artist copies.
I think I do too.
I did the cover.
Yeah, he did the cover, so I let him have a discount on purchasing the bulk items, so he can make a profit off of them.
It's a pretty good cover.
Thank you. But
It's a really good cover. I'm really proud of
I'm
it.
glad you brought up Janie because we are about to break ground.
Okay.
Oh no, I want
Are
to
we
say
ready?
though what
Yeah,
it
go
does
ahead.
say is it goes I hope you enjoy.
Yeah.
And this is good. He goes, keep working hard. And that's a poor man's thing. Like I love that. Just no God's gift, no bullshit. Like just boots on the fucking ground. If you don't get out there and do the thing doesn't get done. And that's the reality of writing a book.
Well,
And you inspired me a lot the last time we talked, and since
thank
then,
you. I'm
I
happy
haven't
to go on
blown-
a tangent again.
yeah, I haven't
I love
blown
that,
up.
I love that speech because
Dreamers Arcade, the binder, dude. I have 8 of them, and I mean, I'm really starting to work stuff out, maps, notes, and more than just in my head. And I wrote a piece for Rise in Mind. I grinded out some stuff and wrote some back lore, and it's a good feeling. And until you do it, you have nothing to work with. And once you put
Really
some
is.
stuff down, it's like there it is, and now you have like a foundation. It's inspiring, man. And like I'm getting there with my stuff. I hope to write my first issue for the Dreamers Arcade this winter, and yeah, it's going to be one hell of an undertaking. But knowing that, I mean, this guy, I don't know if we said it, he puts out a book yearly. You're dropping a
Yeah.
book every
my
year.
goal is to publish one book a year until I die.
And you said you're going to die at 63 or something.
Yeah,
this
maybe.
whole-
Yeah.
This prophecy.
I've lived a little bit of a rock and roll life, so I'm not. I don't think I'm gonna put 70.
My fat smoking ass. I'm gonna live to be 87. I don't know what you're talking. Hey.
Yeah.
Those of you who
I'm
are
predestined.
those of you who are new to Rise in Mind or to anything that Space Viking Productions does or anything that Dreamers Arcade or CP Sketch does might not know too much about Janie, but we did talk about it before. But I do want to read the back for everybody just so they get an idea.
Okay.
In this Henson meets Lovecraft universe, Janie's sister is kidnapped through a portal to the conscious sanctum, a world full of monsters, trials, and tears. Led by the spirit of her father in the form of a raven, she faces these challenges in order to save her sister from the fate of the Vulture Queen. A path of piranha-toothed mice and man-eating trees awaits her, but can she even save herself when she gets there?
I liked that, and that was very inspiring too. You used some things that were recognizable because I haven't even really considered a lot of this. Where it's like in this Henson meets Lovecraft universe, you're taking two things that people would probably know, right? Like, what you like, you're saying like if you like these two things, like, and I'm like, I didn't read a lot of Lovecraft, but I love Jim Henson, so already you've got my interest just by like saying like some of the stuff that you fuse together, and you're humble about it. Like, look, this is my
and there's subclavian caves, and they're like these big caves that they kind of like pulse when you're walking through them. And when she tries to dig herself out of this cave, it like gushes blood everywhere. It was a lot of fun to write these things because it's just I wanted to think of all these things that are just unsettling and add them into one story, and also not just have it about shock value. Shock value is really easy to do.
Yes.
I know as a comedian, like you could just be like, fucking eat my ass, and like that'll make people laugh, but it's not like, it's just how blunt and like how intrusive you are with stuff, but generally it pisses people off after a while and gets old.
So what I wanted to do is I wanted to have a story that had some sense of meaning in a world that is full of these shock factor stuff. And so far it's gotten some pretty good reviews, and a lot of these reviews are from people I don't even know, and that to me was the most exciting thing. Is when someone who's never really heard of you before gives you a glowing review, you're like, yeah, it's very humbling. You don't even really know what to say because you're like, oh my god, thank you. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah. Right now I'm actually trying to publish my 5th book. It's called Beggars of Elysium, and it's finally done being edited. You guys both are aware of the artist Bob Tukasik.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He's pretty
and
awesome.
You're probably the only one who could say his name right, so like you've saved us all.
Thank you. Yeah.
He's fantastic. Yeah. I love Bob, and he is doing the cover for it, and I entertain the question: what if in the afterlife every religion is kind of right?
Yeah,
so I combine.
I like that. I like fuse it all together. Like it's just deviations of one.
Oh yeah.
So
one bedtime story, which we can clearly define through history.
The story
Viking will tell you how much Viking culture has threaded through other ones and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed by that.
Yeah, the story follows this gentleman by the name of Isaac Webb, who freezes to death in one particularly cold winter Maine night, and he's homeless, and he just dies in a parking lot. And then by the end of the first chapter, he wakes up on a train station, and on this train station, he has to take the long black train to the end of to the light at the end of the tunnel, which crosses the River Styx using the Rainbow Bridge.
Oh, that's cool.
That's just the beginning.
Mario Kart Rainbow Road, yeah.
Yes, Mario Kart. Nailed it.
That's all I can think of now. Over the River of Styx, and the dude's like, get the fuck down here. Better not fall off.
DP, are you aware of the Rainbow Bridge myth?
This is the Bifrost, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah, the Bifrost is the Rainbow Bridge that goes into Asgard. So Joe's mixed that with Greek, I believe, right? The River Styx. Yeah. Okay.
That was a lot of Greek mentions. I have a lot of Egyptian stuff in there because Egyptian theology is just so fascinating, and it's actually what got me into it in the first place. I spent about 4 months studying different theologies, and it wasn't like, okay, so objectively, what do the ancient Egyptians believe? I went to all of these sites and I said, now let's just say, for argument's sake, that you want to convert me into your religion. What is it about your religion that is supposed to entice me to believe these things? And that's when you start hearing like the most keynote, interesting things, because you're trying to be hooked into this following. And the thing that made this book so tricky to me was I was trying to also remain respectful of people who still believe these things. And I know that there's a crowd for everything I did. For example, uh, in Elysium, you get in my book, Beggars Elysium, you get a job in the afterlife based on what your zodiac sign is. And so this guy's a Sagittarius, and he wants to work at a library. And they're like, "Oh, you'll get along great with our other friend. She was an Aries, so you guys are great." And he's like unfamiliar to all of this stuff, so he just kind of goes, okay." So she kind of explains it to him because the majority of my readers don't follow a lot of the religions and beliefs that are in this book. So I try to give them an explanation without being demeaning to it. When I was in Guatemala, I learned that the ancient Mayan people believe in this giant bat. It's like the size of a World War II bomber, and he's called the Camazotz. And this giant bat brings the night with him, and he watches over the dead. And I said, how cool is that? Now, cool factor aside, I still need to be respectful to the people who believe in that stuff. So that was the hardest part, was being entertaining and respectful. And it was kind of a challenge that I really enjoyed because I like to challenge myself when I'm doing my writing. If I just fall into a funk of like, oh, well, I just want to write cyberpunk all the time, potentially I could do that all day, but am I ever growing when I'm doing
You'll
that?
end up in I like to call it the Jim Butcher problem. People
Yeah.
love
I know what you're
Dresden,
talking
the
about.
Dresden Files, and
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, great series. But I can't imagine being the writer of that, because so many books with just one character, one world. I was like, I wouldn't be able to live there.
Wouldn't it be easy? It's like your day job, dude.
It would
It's
become,
like,
well, that's the problem. I don't like the day job feeling.
I mean, like if there was an aspect of the Dreamers Arcade that was like highly monetizable, if that's a word. Yeah, I would just be pumping those out, you know, and writing side stuff or whatever. That's cool, man. I like the Egyptian thing because like I find that culture fascinating. How they would build these monuments. Ka would go around the world, and like I've adapted some of that in my writing. That idea of the circulating spirit, but just the idea of the consumer based world and the things, and representing your things with like representing yourself with lots of stuff so that your spirit can like see it and find it, is when you're talking about something that's ingrained in consumerism. Like it is this kingly way to extend yourself in a world that is probably not spiritual, but it was still like being represented, and it creates this tension that I find interesting. That, and it's like they also were rocking the original emojis stuff, and there's so much stuff that was so cutting edge for the time that is really applicable now. So you could play into a lot of conspiracy theories with like the aliens came down and like gave them all the information, and then the society kind of crumbled to other civilizations. But then it's like, how is it coming back? It's like, oh, the aliens keep coming back, and they're like, no, dude, this is gonna work way better. You guys are killing yourselves, and you can get into all these cool side stories. But it's hard. You bring up a good point. Like, how do you represent something, especially as a white American male, and be like, am I completely culturally appropriating this shit for my own amusement, and am I being disrespectful?
I was raised a Baptist, so I only have a certain experience by looking at these other theologies, and I do include, a couple of Christian things in there, but I didn't want to go too heavy-handed with just one. So, for example, with the Egyptian, well, I'll describe to you how they decide, whether or not you get accepted into the afterlife. So, when you are standing in line for judgment, eventually this train does take you to a great hall where you are judged on several scales. And in Egyptian lore, they put your heart on a scale, and if it's lighter than a feather, then you are allowed to go through. If it is heavier, this is based on heaviness can be dependent on sins you've committed, atrocities, things that you are guilty in your heart for. It could be a number of things. And if you fail the scale test, then they literally just feed your heart to a giant crocodile and you just disappear into obscurity.
Good God.
Now, the angle I took with this is I said, okay, what can I use with this system? Because it's the most cut and dry system. Because there's a lot of systems that really depend on a lot of how you lived your life. This one seemed the most clear way to explain, how someone can be accepted. And so the scale, when you get on, it can go left, it can go right, and it can point straight up at neutral. So when it points left, it takes you, it condemns you. So basically what they do, what I do with the damned in this is they become slaves. And this whole society is built on the condemned, functioning as slaves in this society. If it points right, then you don't have to do any of that. You get your own house, all the cool stuff. If it's neutral, you actually become reincarnated as an animal and live in Elysium as an animal that inhabits it. So
I choose cat.
yeah. So when you get this neutral position where you're reincarnated, there's an old Indian guru who will tell you, based on the actions of your life, this is what you deserve. And then you get turned into whatever you deserve to be turned into. At one point, my main character runs into someone who's been reincarnated as a rat. And that was particularly fun for me. He's like, what the hell did you do to turn into a rat? And he's like, I don't know, man. I'm just a rat now. That's all I know.
I don't know. He doesn't even know. That's great.
Yeah. So
It's just how it is.
It's just how it is. And I try to cover a wide topic of, different people. The scale, the way the scale works is the kind of things that it judges you based on the harm you've committed to other people. So I think, to me, that's a fair system. If you've gone out of your way to push people down or bully people or things like that, or obviously, like if you're a dictator, like that kind of stuff. But it's entirely dependent on how you treated other people in your life that the scale judges you by. And to me, in my opinion, this is the most fair way to do it. Not about I don't know. It's just not necessarily selfless acts, but just going out of your way to mess with somebody or harm them. I think that would weigh into it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's fair.
Less karma, more harma. Oh.
Gotcha. So it's funny because this is the most I've actually opened up about it, but I'm trying to release it between the end of fall, early winter this year.
Do you have a working title?
Yeah, Beggars of Elysium.
Oh, that's great. Oh man, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
It sounds marketable too.
Alrighty, guys.
Like you were I think you were talking about like marketable titles. Like in different genres, like the fact that it's spelled out in a way like I don't really know a lot of them off the top of my head, but the fact you've beggars of in a zone or something, that would be kind of a thing that would catch people's attention, right?
Yeah.
I like the irony of, you have someone who's homeless in like paradise, a heaven, essentially.
Yeah.
And I thought that I like the the contrast of the two words.
I'd call it gobbles in the clouds, but that's me.
Good one. Yeah.
Alrighty, guys. It is it is like the last day of September.
Yeah, it's the 30th,
so
man.
I wanted to talk about let's get into Halloween mode. You guys ready to break ground?
Do you want me to get my Freddy Krueger gloves?
Whatever you want to do. Oh wait, I had music queued up for this. Okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could do
That's fantastic. We're gonna break ground here.
we could do a product review real quick. Here we go.
No.
spend $5 more. Here we've got the $13.99
God
Freddy
damn it, CP.
Krueger glove at Spirit Halloween. Yeah, there we go. And then man, you go 20 though. You go 20, guys. It's way better.
Oh, holy shit.
Oh, dude, it's got the action, it flicks and everything, dude. So, you get what you pay for. I'm not saying buy the $60 one.
It's Halloween, so buy, consume, spend money.
I mean, look at this. This is dead fucking squish spider.
Oh, yeah.
But this is like the one I had when I was a kid, so they're fun.
Yeah.
Waste your money on plastic and shit.
Buy product. Get excited for next product.
You can tell I'm poor. I spend my money on stupid shit. There's my.
We have got a quite interesting subject. I wanted to talk about this with Joe specifically on the show because Joe, you're one of the kindest humans that I know.
Jesus
Like,
Christ, fucking.
You've got like this demeanor about you that like you just instantly feel comfortable around, and like I'm sure it comes into your background a little bit, but I've always felt like very safe around you. And like from a male to male perspective, you don't hear that very often, so it's also part of our show is like we tend to like break down those walls as well. And you've also been that kind of person as well, which is another reason why I love having you on the show. But to break ground, I just want to talk about like you not only consume horror, but you write it. And
yeah, I cut my teeth on writing horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you're such a incredibly kind person, so I love this sort of juxtaposition that we end up seeing in society as well. Some of the most kind people
What
I've
does
seen.
that mean?
I don't know.
Anyway, cut your teeth. Does that mean when your teeth are just coming in?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
When you first begin with something.
It's just like we have all these sayings that are like just like pre-programmed, and I realize I'm saying things, and a lot of times, and I'm like, what does that actually friggin' mean?
When I started getting into writing and taking it seriously, I was writing a lot of horror. I'm going to steer the ship into some dark waters for a second, but I promise we'll get back out of it.
No, that's where
we're in the deep dive, right?
No,
so at the time,
we should be in the deep dive. We're in breaking ground, though.
But we're still kind of coming up, surfacing nervously.
Sorry, go ahead.
And at the time when I was taking my writing more seriously, I've been writing since I was in the 4th grade, but I didn't really think I could market my stuff until I was 20-something. So when I started writing, I was writing a lot of horror, and this is because, in my opinion, I was in a really dark space. I was not only active duty military, but I was also in a pretty abusive relationship. And this relationship was financially, emotionally destructive. And when you're in a relationship like that, you don't really have a say in what happens. It's easy to look at it from a third person's perspective and say, "Oh, just get out of it." Well, when you're in the thick of it, you can't just get out of it. The only escape I had was the only medium I knew, which was writing. Now, when I was writing, I wasn't writing like happy puppies and kittens. I was writing like this really dark stuff. The first novel I ever wrote was about a serial killer who targeted children in the 2000s. And they died in some pretty messed up ways. So it was like the only control I had was abusing fictional characters. So I think that I would argue the reason why my writing has, when my writing gets dark, it gets really damn dark. I mean, even in Janie, the dark moments feel pretty dark, but I think that's just from experience at that point. But with the life I have now, this person has written off all rights to the children. I'm with a wife who convinced me to leave my really scary, crappy job so that I can pursue my writing career. She she has 2 nursing jobs, so she's constantly helping me financially to support my writing lifestyle. And I think in that positive headspace, that's why I've kind of calmed down a little bit. I've become a lot less heavy-handed with my writing, with the darkness of it. And I'll say the same. I'll say to you what I said to my first counselor. Even nice guys have nightmares. Like you can be a really sweet person who goes out of your way to volunteer at an animal shelter or something like that. But at the end of the day, you still have fears and insecurities the same as everyone else does.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is, in one way or another, you find it, you need to have an outlet for that. And for me, that outlet happened to be writing. And so I wrote some pretty uh, I wrote a lot of really dark stuff, and I've even I've written a lot of poetry too. What I do to warm up before I write for 2 hours is I will hand write a poem, and it doesn't have to be good. It's just between me and the notebook. No one else has to see it. That's when I feel like I kind of purge all of these really terrible things that I'm going through in my head mentally, and I put them all there. That way, it's kind of out of my system a little bit, and I can think more logically about the story. And because when art is an emotional process, you guys are both artists, and you know that. It's an emotional process, and I think that the reason why I wrote so much horror was because of the headspace I was in. You don't have to be the product of your environment. My environment was pretty nasty, and to steer the ship out of the storm a little bit, it's ended up being more positive for me in the long run, because I'm able to take these things I'm insecure about, and a basic insecure thought that I could have is now something that I can have somebody purchase for $10. It ends up working in the long run. And I honestly also think that I wouldn't appreciate the things I have now if it weren't for the darkness and the terrible times that I went through in the first place. I want to be the adult that I always wish that I had, and the companionship with other people that I've always wanted to have. And I learned that the majority of the time, when you just want to be that person someone can rely on, just be reliable. Don't promise anything, but prove everything. So it's all about it's not just how you present yourself. It's about understanding that that person is also going through something also. And as artists, we are professional people watchers.
Yeah.
I know that you guys sit at con and you're like, oh man, that would be such an interesting character. Now that's what I do as a writer.
All the
I see
time.
these other characters, and when I'm interacting with other people, I feel like I can kind of see through people a little bit more, especially after having been abused for 7 years. I was able to just see the truth behind someone's eyes when they're speaking to me. And I want to be the person who is as true and genuine to one person as I can be with the other. Now, if someone's going to confront me and be disrespectful to me, that's a whole other story. But, unprovoked, that person deserves your respect. And the least you can do is, give them your attention.
Yeah.
So
We've got
I think that's what
You let them know you hang out with those Rambos. Fucking those Rambos. Those Rambos.
So
Don't throw shade on Joe Slater over here, because the Ram boys will take you down, brother. I'm gonna get my fucking macho man's on. Jack Crow, thanks for coming on in too, buddy.
correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but it sounds like you're saying that people who enjoy horror might be finding catharsis in it, and
Yes, absolutely.
It might have a lot to do with well, it's like part of breaking ground is what I brought up on the screen here too. What researchers think. Can't hear me. Damn it.
Then turn your fucking speakers up. Sorry.
Yeah, no. We had a
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, we all can. My
I can hear Matt okay.
Everything says that it should be working. Dragonfly
Maybe we can't. Maybe you're just going through the Discord, but we're not.
Just as a
We
disclaimer,
we don't need to hear him.
just as a disclaimer, oh, when I moved back, yeah, no, I do have a noise cancel thing. So we're in breaking ground. Hold on. All right.
Yeah.
So we're in breaking ground, and what we do as
Mark.
part of this. No, the clap is for editing, so I can edit out that whole thing. So it
There you go.
is a common, like, what researchers say is, why do humans like horror? Like, it says it's a combination of adrenaline rush and an opportunity to learn about dealing with scary situations in a safe environment. Klassen and his colleagues identified 3 broad types of horror fans as adrenaline junkies, white knucklers, and dark copers. And like, dark copers, I believe, is referring to people who are coping with it, using it as a coping mechanism, which is like what I think what Joe was touching on heavily, was that you have darkness in your soul, write it or experience it in a safe
Don't
place.
have a creative outlet, so I believe that horror movies helps them with that outlet also.
Yeah.
And if you want to market yourself as a horror artist or writer, it's important to know what makes horror horror. In my opinion, and again, this I've written a lot of horror, so I feel like I can say this, but in my opinion, horror isn't necessarily a single moment in time. Horror is a vibe. Look at well, I studied World War I in my free time, and I learned that in World War I, especially, and I can't say especially on the Western Front, because you had the Ottoman Empire and all those other things too. But I'm just going to go with the part of World War I most people know about. In the Western Front, that horror wasn't just, watching your buddy who you went to high school with get shot in front of you. Yes, that's horrific and traumatizing, but the horror is also what the air feels like. You know what I mean? Like it's the drudgery, the not knowing, what's going to happen next on a constant basis. You could be shelled in the middle of the night, and you would just be another statistic from the front line. And it doesn't even end there, because they didn't treat shell shock with anything but electrical therapy, and sometimes they'd slap you around, and it never ends. Yeah. To me, that's horror. Horror is something that is worse than death. And the fear that something worse than death is going to happen to you.
You bring up a really good point too, like getting into a larger global like horror situation, something like a war. A lot of people would just kind of default and go to like World War II, but World War I, I haven't studied a ton on it, but I follow a lot of artists like that were, well, yeah, I follow them on Instagram. That sounds funny. I follow, Kirchner and Picasso on the gram. No, so those artists, you may have heard of Guernica. It's a famous Picasso painting. He did like 7 different iterations before he finally got it right. It was outrage to the bombing of, I think, Guernica, Spain. It was like the first civilian area that they, war used to be like, line up and, like, let's all fight the battle over here. But with technology, they were shelling everything, and now it was like
machine guns, snipers, shells.
Yeah, and that was like the first time like a civilian area was just bombed all to shit, and it's scary because like now that's pretty normalized, right? Like that happens all the time. But can you imagine just 100 years ago it had never happened? And so like horrors during the early 20th century were being constantly introduced, and I look to the artist that inspired me a lot, Kirchner, who was an expressionistic painter. That poor guy was caught up in a lot of German nationalism, and he was just upset, and he followed a lot of African like styles and tradition, and thought of himself as not a painter, like a shaman connecting a ritual, and he had these very open views of humanity and expression that were exacerbated by this coming war. He was eventually drafted, came back without his hand, He lost his
Oh.
hand in the war, which for an artist is terrible. Did paintings of himself all. I mean, it's like night and day when you look at those paintings and they're all green and they feel horrible and sick. And then shortly after that, you know, he committed suicide, and it's like,
Wow.
oh, holy shit. And you see the impact on people who are trying
You can
to be
visually see the
expressive.
decline of his mentality.
Yeah,
You
and
can.
and so it's amazingly prolific. Some of these
So
at times as parts of grief, as a
yeah, let me give an example of fiction that I think works really well, and it makes horror work. I
There you go.
believe that we were talking a little bit earlier about
Fourth row, three in.
we were talking a little bit earlier about Sleepy Hollow. Now, what makes Sleepy Hollow so scary? Is it just the fact that the horseman is chasing you? Sure, that might be a couple of climaxes in the story, but what it is it's about walking through these deep, craggly woods with black tree limbs everywhere and the dense fog, and he could come from anywhere. That's the vibe. The horror in that is he going to get me? Anyone who grew up in, I grew up in the middle of the woods, and it's not about knowing that there could be a creature out there. It's what if there is a creature out there?
Yeah, the
What if
psychological.
everything that I've heard about is true?
I love.
I was actually even attacked by a moose on foot once, and
Damn,
after
dude.
that, I watched it trample my brother into snow, and then it brushed past
Ooh.
me, and it was a whole thing. It was pretty traumatizing. But after that, I didn't really want to go hiking anymore because all I could think of is like, now, yes, the possibility of it happening is like 10%, but what if I'm in that 10%? And what if that is out there waiting for me? And
Yeah.
again, not to beat it to death, but I believe that horror isn't just a single act. Yes, there are horrific acts. Yes, I understand that. But at the same time, if you're writing a fictional story that is horror, you don't want to just have someone who's going throughout their day, they do the dishes, and then they go out to the garage and then they find a body in the garage. It's knowing that, like, let's run with that for a second. So someone is washing the dishes and they go out to the garage and then there's a body in it. Okay. Well, that could be scary. That could be kind of shocking. But if you started that story instead, as this person had to wash the blood off their hands before they did the dishes, and they put on bandages, you could play it off so this person looks like they got in a fight. And then they go out to the garage and you find out that they've been hiding a bunch of people's heads out in the garage in the freezer. That is a little more horrific because by mentioning the blood on their hands before doing the dishes, it sets the tone. And the tone is everything with horror.
Oh yeah.
You don't go from mediocrity to slashers. Slashers work because they are slashers and they're their own genre. But this is why haunted house movies and stories can come off as kind of funny to us because it takes the mediocrity and it's jarring. Like, oh yeah, obviously this is an old rundown, shack of a building in the middle of nowhere where there's no cell reception and the cars don't start. But let's move in there anyways. Or like, okay, well, you have a character, you have a bunch of characters that are just kind of like brushing things off, and it's mediocre, and then suddenly, they spend one night there and everything happens. That is it is kind of a way to, you've established that it could be a horror movie because you've used a really tired trope of the haunted house, but you could also go to the house because the person doesn't want to move there. The person could this is why I think Rose Red works, because these guys know it's a messed up house and they're all psychic, and this house reacts to people who have psychic abilities, and they're all going there knowing that they know it's messed up inside. It's killed people before. That's why I think the setup for that is better than other haunted house stories. And it starts right off with a vibe. Like, it's not, oh, little Jimmy, we're going to have so much fun out here. No, well, you and little Jimmy can both see ghosts on a normal basis. Now you're going to a place that is infested with demons and ghosts and stuff. Like, you've already You have the premise for it already.
Hmm.
And I think that someone who has seen, I'm going to use my relationship that was really bad as an example. There's always a sense that something is wrong, something bad's going to happen. It's like, hey, I'm going to go hang out with the guys. And the response you get is, yeah, that's fine. So to a person who hasn't been in a situation like that, they say, oh, well, they said it's fine, so they can go do it. But anyone who's been there knows that that's a dare. That's not permission. That's a dare. Now, you take dare and you go and hang out with the boys. Your phone's gonna blow up the whole time you're there, and you're gonna come home and you're gonna have a big fight. And there's a sense of dread there. And it's not about, going from one thing to another. It's about knowing that there are stakes already before something even happens.
Yeah, the psychological aspect. Like for me, something horrific needs to have the psychological aspect. If like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the not Freddy Krueger did that great, but then any of the Friday the 13th did not scare me nor entertain me, because it was just like, oh, he's gonna come out of the woods and kill them. Okay, I knew that already.
13th has gotten some shade lately. Like people, the Baron just rewatched some of it too. He's like, these movies are fucking terrible. I'm like, yeah, dude, there's not really many good ones in there. The same Michael Myers had the same fate. Freddy, like at least they were constantly upping it and being self-aware, and it was always evolving the gag. But Jason's some boring ass shit, dude. It's the same thing over and over again.
Late 70s.
I don't want to push what Joe said out of the way about the relationship thing, because like that's a really great parallel of like we encounter psychological manipulation in our brains, do recognize that as a fear. Like we don't want to be psychologically manipulated, so that's almost more of a horrific feeling than someone chasing you with a knife. That's almost worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're always there, man. We can't
for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah. We can't be main based writers and artists without mentioning the King himself. Stephen King, horror writer, and you take Pennywise, and like Pennywise isn't necessarily scary because it's just a clown. Sure, he made the clown kind of the thing, but it's that area of distrust. It's that area of like, something's inherently fucking wrong with a clown that wears a mask. Like, what's on the inside? And then when you find out it's your greatest fear, and you realize it's just you overcoming fear, and then it's hitting those beats of the small town and the turn a blind eye. And when you live in like what you're doing with your writing, much like what he did with the Vacation Planet, it's you put that relatability in there that makes it human. And I think that's the most important thing. When like we all want to write cool scenes or some wild war or something action packed, but unless you're relating people to your story, it's over, pal. You were talking about doing the dishes. Who hasn't done the dishes? That's perfect. And if you're talking about the monotony or the boringness of the approach, you're writing this story about how terrible the dishes are, but then you're like you're also talking about cleaning up a body while you're cleaning up the dishes, and then you realize like, oh, all that shit you were just writing about the dishes was him cleaning up the bodies in the barn. It's like now we all can relate to the dishes and that experience, but now we're in part associated with the crime that's been committed. So it's not only creating anxiety and tension in the story, it's implicating us in our own individual like horrors and experiences.
It takes the familiar and turns it into something more uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think that's why good horror movies tend to work out, because they take something fantastic, but they just ingrain it in some monotony, like Halloween, like people just babysitting kids. Like how many teenagers would just do that? And then as they go do that, they're in that situation, and now it's like, oh, hope Michael Myers doesn't come get me, that kind of situation, like, or being out in the woods, creating accessibility is so important.
I've been in some pretty boring corn mazes wishing Michael Myers would come. Spice it up a little bit.
Well, that's probably time for you to put the suit on and be your full realized self.
Oh man, well, that's gonna be for the next segment, but I could touch on it a little bit of like actually scaring people is so outside of my normal MO, and it was so much catharsis in it when I worked in a corn maze as the monster. I got to be the monster for it. It was so
monster,
fun.
Monster Matt.
Got to scare some kids.
It was the Monster Matt.
And like
Trying to
figure out where to stand, how to stand, like where, like what the lighting is like. How does my mask look at this? Like trying to figure out how to scare someone.
Break down to a science how to be scary.
Yeah, I'm like,
see, even back then, the focusing on the details. If I can just see this guy out here, like, oh, my mask is fucking crooked. I'm not scary. Just jump out and go. Blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter.
No, well, I did like break it down a little bit, but when it came to like my mask being straight, like it was a crapshoot.
I'd rather have a gay mask myself. That's a joke on straight. Straight mask, Bring the gay mask out. That's how.
I got it, CP.
I mean, come on. I'm canceled. I can't even make a funny joke.
I already muted you like 2 minutes ago.
Oh, god damn it. Hey,
I'm just kidding.
It doesn't matter.
I
gotta take a quick break. You guys can choose to or not. I gotta get some more coffee and go to the bathroom real quick. But you guys continue to talk and move on to the next segment.
I'm gonna let Joe speak while you take your break. Unless Joe, do you need a break?
Did he just fucking Kanye West him? Hold on, Joe. I'm gonna let you finish.
Yeah, once CP gets out of here. I'm just kidding.
I don't mind.
CP, your shit was good, but Joe's shit was way better. I'm gonna let you finish though.
I tend to go on rant, so if you just present me with a question, I'll probably take about 5 minutes to rant on it.
I'm gonna let you finish.
All right, guys. I'm taking my break.
Okay.
You don't pay me enough for this shit. I can't even hear you fucking. Got my rising mind on, baby.
Now, for those of you just joining us as your first show, this is how we are. We love each other. There's a lot of love here. It's just some japes. I thought you said you couldn't hear us, CP. No, just kidding. So Joe, as a writer of horror, though, like I imagine there's a lot of how do you be scary, like from like the characters in the book, and like jumping through your own experiences, and like I know I've played a scary person in those times when I was in the corn maze, and it was so fun to sort of step out of myself and into something a bit more horrific and scare some children and be like, yeah, scaring those children. When you're writing it, how does that feel? Like, what is that like to sort of bring horror to people?
Well, I personally like to have it lead up to something. For example, I sent in a short story submission for a writing competition for short stories. They're not going to be getting back to me until probably almost November, though, so I don't really know what's going on with it. But what I do in it is it is about a monster that is created during World War I, and it's basically a man-made demon. There's so many deaths and destruction and human life lost in such a short amount of time and space that creates this monster that no one can see unless there's artillery blasts around it. It kind of like reveals itself in the smoke. That's so cool. And what it does is it pulls the souls from all the bodies that have just lost their lives in the no man's land. And it doesn't start with these guys watching this monster feast on their souls. It starts with these guys dealing with everyday horrors. like the smell of rotting, maggoty flesh of their comrades who are just out of reach. They can't rescue them. It is them eating sawdust mixed with flour, which was a real thing that people ate, by the way. It was about rats coming up and biting you in the middle of the night, and um, people falling in the mud. And this isn't just like it's a little goopy and sticky. This mud it killed. There's a quote, and I can't name the person, but there's a quote from World War One that said, "Hell isn't fire, hell is mud." And
Oh,
what happens
that's
is
brilliant.
if you're not strong, if you fall into the mud off of these planks that go across no man's land, that's pretty much a death sentence. If you fall off and land on your face, you could suffocate and no one could rescue you. So if you like, even if you put your hands down to like push off the ground, now your hands are like stuck in the mud too. So like you're just dead there. So this is just the real horror that actually happened to real people. In fact, in the Battle of Verdun, there were 300,000 Frenchmen who died, and 200,000 of them were buried alive by mud.
Hmm.
Only a third of those people were killed by direct fire.
So a lot of
To me, that is horror. That like imagine being buried alive in the middle of a battlefield where everyone is so distracted by combat that no one has the time to find you. You just know you're dead, and you get to spend the rest of your life suffocating. And to me, that's like real horror. Now that I've established that that's what the horror is that the people are running into on a day-to-day basis, let me introduce something. What would make that more scary? Now, keep in mind that back these days, people were much more spiritual than they are today about being on the lines and such. So when they saw something that resembled a demon in any way, that's like, they're praying more. In fact, my main character lost his faith when he was on the lines until he saw this creature. Then he started praying again,
wow.
and it all kinds of it's so afraid. I take the question of what if the Germans shoot me? I take that question and I say, yeah, what if I die, and turn it into what happens to me when I die? Is that monster going to get me? And so I follow forward with that, and so I've already set the scene by saying, these are really horrible ways people die in the war, and you get trench foot and all of that stuff. If you get PTSD or shell shock back in the day,
Hmm.
no one's going to save you from that. If anything, there's actually cases of people taking people with PTSD and sending them back to the front line because they said, well, you already think you're on the front lines. I might as well send you back.
Oh, damn.
And they just had no regard for mental health. So this very cruel universe I've created based off of reality, I now introduce this supernatural element to it. And it kind of builds to a point like, sure, these really horrible things happen, but now that these horrible things in line of events have continued, it's all coming to a head. And at the climax of the story, I, describe, what happens when you interact with it directly. And to me, I was trying to write in a way that would give me chills. I was writing the story that would make me uncomfortable, make me feel like I'm reading a horror story, because um, there's unfortunately there's a lot of writers out there that believe that good horror writing uh, involves just gore. Now, gore works in horror, but that's that's like having a movie that gives you a jump scare every 5 minutes. Like, obviously, it makes me uncomfortable. You just killed a baby. Like, yeah, obviously, I'm gonna feel sick, but it's about something deeper than the action in front of you. That's, in my opinion, what makes good horror. Again, with the Sleepy Hollow reference, it's about what the hell is the headless horseman? What is his deal? Why is he coming after these people? Why is that such a big deal? Sure, you could show him beheading these people on the trail, but
What is his
That's
deal,
just like
man?
climaxes throughout the story. What it is, knowing that he could find you and you couldn't stop him because he's already dead. Like knowing that like there's nothing you can do when he finds you. That makes it scarier than, oh, there's a guy out there. Ooh, he's gonna get you. It's
I mean, how many
I don't know if
times?
I'm making any sense with
No,
that or not.
you are, because there's so many times in my life when I'm like walking alone at night and there's a foresty patch in town and I look over there and my brain says there's something there, and like, but my eyes are saying there isn't, and then they start to mix. I start to see swirls in the darkness that start to appear like a figure. And I feel like that's where a lot of these legends came from. A lot of these myths and stories that became horrific is that not only am I now imagining a figure, my brain is telling me why I care, why I should be afraid, why I need to pay attention. And then the story starts to form. That looks like a figure without a head on a horse, and it just starts to get even creepier and weirder. I'm not sure
Yeah.
that's the actual origin of the story, but I know that's how what my brain does to sort of come up with some of these things,
Yeah.
trying to just protect myself.
And then talking about Sleepy Hollow and the project that I have coming up, it's interesting for me because I was like, how do I make Sleepy Hollow creepy down here in this particular neighborhood? And when you select Sleepy Hollow for a theme, it's like, well, everyone's gonna do probably the Headless Horseman because like, what else do you do for a window display? Have like Ichabod Crane like sitting there like writing a book or something or teaching school? It's like it's limited when you want to be like very direct on the theme. So my idea was to update it, make it kind of my junky aesthetic, talk a little bit about build a giant pumpkin out of trash that's basically eating the town of Sleepy Hollow.
That's
And so you have this other meaning, but what the Sleepy Hollow town is a recreation of the park up the road. And then I'm laying out the landmarks in the park to mirror that. So when you see that and you see it swallowing the town, the park, you can actually go into the park and then walk around. So what would that do if you then went to the park and you realize you're in it, but now are you in the mouth of the giant pumpkin head that's going to like crush you all down? So I'm trying to figure out ways to tie in visual components to
I really like how you weren't so on the nose with it. A lot of people, they think Sleepy Hollow and they go, "Oh, Headless Horseman," but
yeah.
that's really on the nose, and I like it when it's not right on the nose like that. I think it makes it more creative when you go other than that. Yeah.
You have to update stuff for an audience that can appreciate it. And we've heard that story so many times. So it's like, what could be changed?
Yeah,
Gore
so
factor.
easy to go
Yeah.
into. That's what Joe was touching on a bit while you were on break, so we can go into that a bit more so you have a chance to comment on it. I do feel like gore is such a scapegoat. It's like, oh, I'm making a horror movie. Just make it really bloody and have limbs coming off and kill babies, and it's gonna be scary. And then someone like people like us will watch that and be like, yeah, that's freaky and gross, but why do I care? How does this relate to like anything? And where's the for me it's the psychological aspect. I can't speak for both of you, but the psychological aspect is when I would get scary. Like when I would get scared. There was one called The Hills Have Eyes. That one
Yep.
actually freaked me out a little bit. And then
I
there
like
was
that one.
The House on the Hill, I think it was called, where the woman was trapped in her house and there was a person just stalking her. And it was just
Yeah.
one dude and a woman alone in her house. And it was the direction and the storytelling and the lighting that brought it home. Like, this is scary. This sucks.
I
Yeah.
like psych thrillers are my favorite because to me that is a very pure form of horror without relying on Jason cutting someone's head off.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind for me, one of my favorite, I don't know if it's a horror movie, but my favorite psych thriller is The Secret Window.
Oh.
Because you question yourself: is this person actually going insane? What's happening here? What is reality? The Machinist is another good one. If you've ever seen that one with Christian Bale, he weighs like 96 pounds in it. Um, I like psychological horror because you it makes you question more and not like, let's deep dive into if this is reality. It's more like, holy crap, I thought that was totally real. Like, he the in the Machinist, he's like buying a slice of pie at a diner every single night, and this is just normal. It's normalized. This is his daily schedule, and towards the end of the movie, he like goes in there, and the waitress isn't even the same waitress, and he's like, oh, where's she at? And they're like, oh no, she who are you talking about? And like you start questioning like how much of this has been in his head this whole time. American Psycho, another great example.
Yep. And
Like
also,
you don't know, and I like it. It doesn't horror doesn't have to answer every question. I think that's more of a thing for slashers. Like, oh, where did Jason come from? Versus, in the early Michael movies, what made him scary was like you don't know what this guy's deal is. He just walks around and stabs you with a kitchen knife. You don't really know, his whole origin or anything like that. And I think that added to the mystique of it.
the
And
first,
I think I just like a lot of psychological horror because you can really go in a lot of really interesting directions with that.
the first couple Saw movies as well had that, like, you didn't quite know what was going on or who it was doing it.
Yeah,
Those
that
did.
first Saw movie was amazing, and that's all they should have made, probably.
Yeah, they relied a lot on shock value too, but the shock value was what was happening to the characters getting trapped, and the psychological aspect was why are they even there? What's this guy's deal? Like,
What do they do to get here?
yeah,
I don't want to spoil it if nobody's seen Saw 1, but when you
It's been more than a
realize,
decade now, so it's cool.
but if you haven't seen it, just watch it. It becomes, to me, this homage to the artist, where it's like, how much do you commit to your values and your message, and how directly do you deal with it? Like where do you view it, and all these things were like, like when you have that moment when it ends, it's like, oh my god, that's really driven and intense. And it's that moment that I think people respond to. And then when it becomes about like the lore and the backstory, I don't think do you guys care about any of that shit, especially in horror?
Lore?
Like, the origin of the character, or the like Alien, what they're doing now. They're getting back into the Prometheus stuff. Like, I really just thought it was cool that it was the fucking bug thing that wanted to eat people. Like,
yeah, Prometheus
I
kind of
heard
did.
about the first Alien movie is like there's this opposite and opposing driving force that has all these abilities. Like even when you kill it, it has acid blood. Like how do you get rid of this thing? That is more interesting to me than, oh, where did he come from? No, what's interesting is how Ridley is going to get rid of this thing.
Yeah.
That's to me what I cared about.
I would prefer if like Prometheus wasn't like tied in so tightly to the Alien movies. Like I love shit like Prometheus, but I would have preferred it to not be a it was so connected to it that it ruined the mythos. It should have been its own story, like just about the origin of creatures from a far off land, instead of being, oh, this is where the aliens came from. Because I thought that Aliens, all the way up until Alien 4, Resurrection, I think were great. Like all of them sort of got that suspense feeling. And then Aliens versus Predator, I thought was still really cool. And sort of it like teased at the origin of the aliens, but it wasn't so much that it didn't ruin the mythos and like the psychological aspect of what even are these? What's their purpose? Like, with knowing that, you do kind of lose the fear. Now it's now you can understand it, and if you can understand it, then you can overpower it, and it's no longer scary.
Mm-hmm.
What I think's corny about those movies is like they just go too far. You can assume based on Predator and based on Alien, like the way that it would be set up, like the Predators would obviously like to fight these like really aggressive bugs.
Yeah.
But it's like you don't have to get into the whole Western view of it and
Yeah.
temples and how it's like they would just go to LV whatever 14 and find the plant. Oh, there's like an abundance of these friggin' xenomorphs again. Let's go have a drinking weekend because they're not super predators. It's all like sport. It's like, dude, Steve, how many of these fuckers do you think you can take down like without getting acid splashed on you? Like,
yeah.
I could take, I feel like
that would be their vibe.
I feel like I could take maybe 2 before I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I feel like I'm good.
To direct to the chat for a second, Jack Crow says psychological horror is best. It allows you to delve into vulnerabilities or fears and revealing the darker parts of the human psyche.
Jack Crow just brought us to the deep dive.
It's a pretty good point.
I love it when this happens.
Let us go into
bring something up,
deep
and it's like now we're in it.
dive.
We're in the deep dive. That's exactly it. Thank you for bringing us there, Jack Crow.
Yeah, I think my favorite stories are those like it, where it's all an idea of just what the individual's fear is, and how can you generalize that for a larger audience. And one movie that I liked not too long ago, it was called It Follows. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah. The window scene in the car window. Is that the same movie? The lady's head comes down into the window.
Is that Hereditary? I
think that's Hereditary. Yeah, you're right. I'm mixing them up now.
And that's super spooky too. I watched that last year, and that was psychologically like one of those movies where you're like, is this person crazy?
Yeah.
Are we going crazy with them? Are they making all this up? So those are very classic in a sense.
What do you guys think of Jeepers Creepers? That was one that got me.
Oh man, I haven't seen Jeepers Creepers in 20 years. It was Jeepers Creepers. I just remember the song. Where'd you get those? I love movies that have, because then it transcends the movie. Like I listen to oldies and stuff on the radio, and then all of a sudden I'll hear like, "Hey there, little Red Riding Hood," and I remember the movie Striking Distance, where the killer would always play the song. So then the song now has, even after 20 years, has entered my world.
To it.
Yeah, and then it's like, because they can come on any time, and people have a relationship to a lot of these classic songs. If you use something that's first off public domain and you can get the rights to it, but something like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, title theme, there's a lot of reference to Wizard of Oz, and who doesn't know that movie? So it's great to be able to connect a thread into something that could just pop up randomly out there in the universe. But yeah, how do you make it accessible to everybody? And it's just generalizing the topic. You can make it more specific in your writing, but yeah.
I believe that if you have this internal fear of something that other people might not have a fear of, when you write or create that as an art form, you have the opportunity to show other people why this is scary. And I think a good point with that is Jaws. There's millions of people who are afraid of sharks because of Jaws.
Yeah.
And before that movie came out, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, shark, cool." But now it's like, dude, I've seen Jaws. I can't be around sharks. And I think that's interesting, because you can take something that's really scary to you, and if you project it correctly, it can make an influence on other people. And
Jaws is a great example, because I watched Jaws for the first time. I maybe caught clips. Everybody caught clips and stuff. It was on TV and whatnot. I'd see that, and I wouldn't even want to swim in fresh water. I wouldn't want to be in the tub. Like, I was really like, oh man, a shark's something that I can't battle. But contextually, now think of this. I watched Jaws for the first time in its entirety, the year 2020. So if you watch the first half of Jaws, it's like it's a separate movie. The second part of it's like these guys fighting the shark, you know? It's completely two different chapters. And the first part of it was all just these beach managers and shit going, well, there's a shark on the beach, but the 4th of July is coming. And this was before the 4th of July, but we want to open up despite there being a danger. We cannot have the revenue stream from these events to cease because capitalist culture in this town has built everything around it. So it's a very real problem. And I was living through the pandemic where it's like people are like, well, this is a situation where we either want to hide and stay from, or it's a fight or flight response. And some people were all about going out there and fighting it. But a lot of people are like, I don't want to die. So it's that same dilemma of, do we open the beach, even though there's maybe a shark that's going to eat ourselves, or do we go out in the world? So I was dealing with this real psychological thing where it's like, what is safe and what will people do to keep promoting their agency despite it maybe not being a good idea for the people?
Well, the thing about for me, what I got out of Jaws that freaked me out was the little boy at the beginning of the movie. Like, that could be my kid, you know? And
Oh yeah.
my biggest fear is something happening to my kids. And so whenever for me, it's like an easy point. If you're going to freak me out with something, like, just include kids, and that, like, I immediately get uncomfortable. Like, that's why Pet Sematary messed with me.
That was hard.
I don't really mess with like the whole kids harm to children thing. I think this is just my opinion. There's a lot of people who worship Pet Sematary, but I feel like, unpopular opinion here, I think when you bring kids into horror, it's just a cheap trick to mess with, like, specifically like parents. Like, dude, that could be my kid that's out there. And I don't know. I don't really like. I don't mind if there's like a fear that something could happen to your kid, but when you go after a kid because of what my morals are when somebody hurts a kid, I get more angry than I do afraid. Like, dude, that could be my kid, you know? And
Changes the tone for you.
Cheap. You said it very well with that.
It's not fun anymore after that. Once you hurt a kid, to me, like, I'm not invested in it anymore because, like, you've committed like one of the worst things.
It's
So
like when you kill a dog, to me, not to undermine the kid, because that's pretty bad too. But that's just the part that is really hard. It's like, what a cold-hearted motherfucker, you know, to kill a dog, like someone's dog, to be that vengeful, and you know the connection and stuff. But I've seen that a few times, and it always creates like hatred for like this despicable person in my mind. But that was great when they used it contextually with John Wick, because it's like, how do you take that trope and another trope and just stack that shit and really piss people off? In a vengeance film, you want to be angry like that, or a horror that turns vengeance. I love a lot too, where maybe the stuff builds up over time. And you talked about having some writing like this before, where the person becomes the vigilante and goes out and regains final girl power.
The Joker movie that came out in 2019.
Yep, I was just about to say that too in our last
taxi driver.
So the Joker. The Joker was a movie that I didn't expect to be a horror movie, but then when I watched it, I'm like, this is terrifying. Like, you watching him lose his mind. That too, yeah.
I don't see those
Nightcrawler
horror movies. I think that those are just portraits of our society.
Mental health movies. Yeah.
I feel that with the Joker could have been any person. You know, to his point, you know, like he's a mentally ill man that society abandoned, and you could write that about anybody. That could be a veteran with PTSD who ends his own life because he's been abandoned by the VA and help from that, or it could be somebody who has harmful tendencies to others who is allowed to go free, and because they were allowed to go free, they end up becoming a serial killer or something like that, uh, psychopath. So it's I think it's more relatable if you have a movie. It doesn't even have to be a scary movie, but you could just have the process of a book or a story of somebody just dealing with something for a long time, and then one day they just comes to a point and they just snap.
And
And
this
I think of
and the sad reality is something that you touched on with poverty too. Like how many people in the system, maybe they're having help, but the help is not engineered in a way that can diagnose or get them even the medication that they need. There's so many
Yeah.
people that I mean, I've grown up around, I've been there myself. They have drinking people that have drinking problems and things like that. And it's like, no, dude, you just have like probably ADHD and bipolar, and you could just take a pill to even out those chemicals. But the drinking is just capitalizing on your mental illness, keeping you in a state that isn't healthy. But if everyone could get access to this stuff, that's a
Yeah.
sad reality too. Like, I think they touched in that movie where it's like you could have had better care in the
I mean,
70s too. Like how much stuff was just glanced over.
I have a lot of personal demons with what the VA acts like and how they treat people. In person, they're very nice and polite to you, but it just like it's unsettling. I go back to like the ex-wife remark that I made. Like it's like they're saying that they're there to help you, but then they push you something that lobotomizes you instead of helps you through how to handle something. For me personally, the thing that frustrates me most about the VA is you have people who know how to play the system and how to tug at certain loopholes so that they're getting more help than they actually deserve. And then you have people who have no idea how the system works. And the more it doesn't matter how much you plead and beg them, they're just going to treat you like you're somebody else trying to play the system. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's really frustrating for me. And even now, like I've been dealing with stuff with the VA where I went in and told them about my mental health, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, since you're feeling depressed, we're going to give you this." And I took that medication that first week, and it lobotomized me. I was like,
Um,
I was like laid out on the couch drooling on myself. It was like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Like that happened to me, and
got any more left? Holy fuck! Sounds like a
yeah,
weekend. Hey.
yeah, it's not as fun as it sounds because you don't really know the medication they gave me. I was like aware that I was acting this way, and that's what made it worse.
Oh.
Like I
um,
had like no control over my physical body when it was happening, and it was it's scary. And I have been mistreated through hospitals before, where uh, when I lost my gallbladder, they messed up with the surgery. So they put me in the hospital for, I was laid up in a bed for 9 days. And I was in that bed for 9 days without food or water because they kept thinking I was having surgery in 24 hours. And I lost something like 18 pounds in there. I just
Jesus
like,
Christ.
they hydrated me by putting stuff in the IV, but I was just like, I was frail, I was weak, and all they could say to me by the time I was ready for surgery was, you should have shaved your fucking face.
Oh my
So
God.
that's like the only
Wow.
feedback that I got at the end of all of that. And when they were done, they wheeled me out in a wheelchair and pressed me up against a parking barrier and said, "All right, you have a ride coming to get you, right?" And then they folded the chair up and they left into the building. They wanted nothing to do with me. I was just a slab of meat to them.
God, we encounter
And
that
Wow.
so often.
then they expect me to trust the VA to not treat me like that. So it's I could just write a story about my own experience about a story, and it would be my own version of the Joker. Like I just, society just not even society, but like just being abandoned on a normal basis. Eventually, you find a moment, just like what the Joker says in a different Batman. All it takes is one bad day to make a completely sane person lose their mind and end up on the 10 o'clock news. It's
Exactly.
just,
Did you
just
Yeah.
one bad day.
did, did you ever watch Joel Schumacher? his movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas?
Yeah, a long time ago I
Haven't
saw
seen
that. Yeah.
That's a movie to check
that.
out. That's just about a guy who was like in that 1950s like ideological American dream mindset, and he built like weapon systems and stuff. And then one day he was just driving through like California, and he's stuck in a traffic jam. He just loses it, and he becomes kind of like an anti-hero. And then you realize like towards the end of it, it's like a Walter White kind of deal where it's like, oh, he's a little bit further along the lines than we are when compared to other things that seemed more horrific at the time. It's a really good movie, and if you watch the new Batman, this is something that exists only in my thoughts. I should put this out there because Joel Schumacher made Batman, the cheesy ones after Burton.
I'm glad you're bringing it to DC though, because I did want to touch on something real quick.
And this is real quick. He wrote a scene in Falling Down that was, I mean, if you want to say what's Schumacher's like claim to fame, I wouldn't associate him with those Batman movies. I'd say Falling Down is the movie that he should be known for. But I think the new director, I'm drawing a blank on his name, he references Falling Down in a scene with the Riddler later on in the movie. That's like verbatim this scene with Michael Douglas's character and this like racist pawn shop guy. He realizes like that guy's more extreme than me, but I kind of caused this inspiration. He's been watching me on TV, and it's exacerbated his really fucked up views. And he's like, no, I'm not like you. I'm like, no, you're like me. And it's like how perspective can get thrown off in these situations where you're trying to do the good thing, but you're actually creating another scenario. And Batman, he creates like horrible villains in tenfold because he's Batman. He's got this amazing wealth, and all these poor villains kind of build up all around him.
Yeah. That makes me think of people who idolize Rick from Rick and Morty. Like, no, you shouldn't be idolizing him. That's what they're like. Being a even if you are more intelligent than the people around you, it's not about having to prove to them how constantly overwhelming you are to them because they're so much smarter than you. Like, it's about I don't really have a lot of patience for people who will. Well, the Rick and Morty fandom is toxic anyways, but they will they'll be like, oh yeah, well I'm Rick all day long. I'm so smart that I can't handle it, and I have to be drunk all the time and deal with stupid people all the time, even though they're all mediocre. And you're like, how about
can we have those people? Can I have those people on the show? I want a whole episode where it's just like 20 minutes of these guys that are so smart they have to be drunk, and we'll talk about life with them while they're drunk, because they'll have to dull it down for us fucking stupid folks.
Right. I worked at T-Mobile with somebody who swore up and down all day that they were Rick Sanchez, and I was like, okay, well, if you say so, I mean, you're clearly better than me already, so I can't even argue with you about that, right?
The actual Rick Sanchez's of the world are intelligent enough to not say that they're Rick Sanchez.
Yeah, I believe your actions should do the talking.
Exactly. If you have to say it, that's probably not true.
I don't even know who the fuck Rick Sanchez is.
He's the Rick and
He's
Rick
Rick
and Morty.
Rick and Morty.
Oh, that's him.
Yeah.
I've only seen Pickle Rick because my brother-in-law forced me to watch it.
You'd enjoy the show in as a whole, CP. I think you'd enjoy it in general, but the fandom.
It is a fun show, but some people compare themselves to Rick a lot, and
if you're
it's arrogant.
If you're a fan of metaphysical science, it's actual like real science that they use to write the show, and it's like brilliant.
Yeah, that's that Dan Harmon guy, right? Or is that Adventure Time?
No, it's Dan Harmon and Justin something. The Justin guy got in trouble.
Yeah, they fired him.
Yeah, everybody does these days.
Well, if you're
humans are gross.
Well, maybe don't beat your wife. you're fine. It's really
Maybe
not.
he had that-
It's really not
maybe he had
hard
that
to keep your
Bible.
job. It turns out it's really not that hard to keep your job.
You know, you get beat
Right.
her with a thumbstick. That's what it says in the Bible. I don't know what
Sorry,
the fuck.
allegedly, we are a public show, so it was alleged, but still, he's not going to get his job back. Yeah.
I don't know who this Justin sucks. I mean, like,
So as part of
used him.
as part of the deep dive, when did horror start? When did we start enjoying being scared and like actually trying to create stories that were scary?
Church,
You
right?
mean-
Oh, dude.
You mean as far as media has been around?
Well, like we might have different ideas in our head of like where it started, but like supposedly the earliest fiction written was The Castle of Otranto. It was a horror story from, well, they called it Gothic fiction then. It was 1765 was when that was written. And that was like one of the first ones that had like supernatural elements. But I love what CP touched on immediately is that the original horrific things were to scare children into being good and going to heaven.
Yeah, like German folktales.
Yeah.
Last Judgment, baby, all day. Fill them full of guilt, fill them full of fear. You imagine not having horror movies and stuff, then all of a sudden this dude gets
It
up there
just
and he's
used to
like,
be
if you don't act good, the fucking creatures are gonna come down from the clouds. Like, you had to probably get an adrenaline rush when you're like, oh fuck, there's reason for all this. Oh man, the beast is gonna get me. Like,
we got
woo.
Yeah.
like Greek
Krampus and werewolves and that kind of stuff. That was all medieval times
Yep.
stuff.
and
Yeah.
like if you go even further back before medieval, it was like the Greek mythology. It was full of cautionary tales.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
like don't cheat on your wife or you'll end up like Zeus turned into a
You'll
bull
fuck
forever.
a swan or whatever, right? Didn't someone fuck a
Oh,
swan?
that's the way I was good at that.
Zeus had sex with the ocean and created a god from it.
Oops.
That kind of thing.
Oh dang, I created another god.
That's
Yep.
some big fucking alpha energies.
Oh,
Zeus,
dude.
what are you doing this weekend, Zeus? I'm gonna fuck the ocean. Isn't Poseidon gonna get mad? He's too, buddy.
I'm convinced that Zeus was just drunk the whole time.
Oh my god.
You guys, check this out. I'm gonna sleep with the ocean.
Dude, I'm gonna
Dude,
turn
come on,
into
man.
I'm gonna turn into a swan. And
Oh,
Let me call you a
Tur-
cab.
Edgar Allan Poe is perceived as a one of the fathers of horror as well.
I would say, yeah, I would say as far as modern horror goes, Edgar Allan Poe is right at the top of that list.
Like when was it just
Um,
when did it become just a story? Like I know we have like all these like cautionary tales and the biblical things to get people to be good people. But when did it become just a story?
money.
Well, no, I meant like the people that wrote it, just to
No, we
make a story.
monetized it.
Everything's
Oh,
been CP. Everything's been monetized since the beginning of time.
Yeah, but Poe wrote specifically for like magazines, and it was like
Oh.
he was just turning shit out. So it was like a Netflix series. So it became this thing that was media driven, and it was separate from spirituality. So like when you can be like, this is a fun story, and this is the real story, because like you got to pay for the for fun story, and the spiritual story is like here with us all the time. I think this is the way they started to separate it and
His short
by
stories
monetizing.
were in newspapers, and H.P. Lovecraft was selling his cosmic horror, is what we call it nowadays. He was selling his cosmic horror to magazines as articles.
Yeah.
And he was actually, no one really knew who he was. He was still submitting stuff to these magazines, and but no one really knew who he was until after he died. That's like the running joke with horror writers is like, oh, well, I'm not famous because I'm not dead. Like that's
Oh.
like when I die, then I'm gonna hit it big. Like that's like the running joke with horror writers, with the exception of Stephen King. But
Well, and
with,
Stephen King's a good example, right? Because how did Stephen King become majorly known and famous? By opting rights for other sources. I've seen more Stephen King movies and television series than I have read of his actual books. So speaking much on like Poe, he's putting out stuff in a media-driven, accessible magazine, less high art, just entertainment. So King moved into that too. It's like, how do you push your stuff out to the general public and get known and recognized? You
Yeah,
push
that's
yourself into those kind of
yeah.
published
As an
things.
indie writer, I know all too well about that struggle. The problem is, I say it every time I talk to someone about it. Everyone and their grandma can publish something to Amazon for free. The
Mm.
problem is making yourself stand out. And like what Metallica says, it's who you know, not what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that is just true. It's as very unfortunate as it is. There are some indie authors out there who are very, very talented. I follow one guy. He's a history professor named Coy Hall, and I think he's very, very talented. The problem is that he only has like a couple hundred people who actually follow his work, I believe, and I'm right in the same boat. Like I feel like I spend all of my free time listening to listening to people criticize films and script work and why does Tarantino make this dialogue work? How did Michael Bay, make this scene explosive with obviously he's known for his explosions and big action scenes, but why are they epic? Why do they work for him? And I listen to all of these things and constantly listen to booktubers talk about their reviews for things and like what works and what doesn't work. And I spend all of my free time doing this. I spend a ton of money on editing, and I dish out for cover art, and I do the formatting with someone else. Like it's such a process, and the unfortunate thing is people don't care about what your process is. It's what can you how well can you market. The problem with me is that because I accidentally became a multi-genre author, it's hard for me to sell to the same audience over and over again. If I only wrote cyberpunk, I could just constantly dish out to the cyberpunk community, sci-fi fans, that kind of stuff. But by the time I'm done writing that cyberpunk novel, which is why it's taking so long for me to write those books, is by the time you've spent 200 hours and $1,000 on getting them out there, you're done with that universe. You want to move on to something else. And it's kind of like people who don't really have a single genre of music they listen to. Like one day they'll be listening to oldies, and the next minute they're listening to pop. Like it's, you just need a break, right? So the problem with that is, for me, marketing my work is really difficult because the only angle I have with multi-genre is, oh, you don't really like horror? How do you feel about fantasy? Well, I wrote this book In the Sky, that's fantasy. But the problem is, if that person wants more fantasy from me, I don't have an answer for him, even though I've written almost 5 books. So it's really, really tricky to get your work out there, especially in a sea of people who just write it up, edit it themselves, which to me is completely insane. And then they just upload it with the first bit of uh, copyright free artwork that they find, to just plaster on the cover and call it a day. I don't do that. I go way out of my way to make sure that every detail is picked over with a fine tooth comb. And the problem is I just don't have the following that I would like to have because I just don't know the right people. And that's really unfortunate. And I know that this is just like me talking as a writer, but I know that there's other people who do art in other mediums who do the same thing. And there's metal workers who have this issue. I mean, you guys probably know a few artists who are really good, but they don't have the attention they deserve.
You mix.
It's really tricky because
Yeah, you're talking to two of them now.
You mix
I
genres
don't know
too a
about
lot,
that.
Joe. Right?
But
Like, you definitely mix genres a lot though too, which I love. Like, Janie has a lot of horror in it, but it also is very surrealist, interdimensional, like some fantasy aspects to it as well, which I
yeah.
love. And then same thing with Vacation Planet. There were some scenes in Vacation Planet and the second one that really brought the feeling, the visceral feeling of being in that environment, and it felt very horrific for some of those scenes. So like I see a lot of mixing genres, so like there's something for everyone, even if
Yeah.
even if they don't like, say they read In the Sky and they love fantasy, they might also enjoy Janie if they're not turned off by the horrific aspects.
I mean, even in the sky, there was one particular battle scene that I kind of just let my horror, my practice with horror, come shine through. Uh, uh, if you don't know this already, battle and combat can be pretty gruesome. Uh, in a lot of fantasy I read, someone will lose an arm and keep fighting on, and you're like, no, you're in shock at that point. You're going, dear God, I've lost an arm. Um, and I wanted to have these dragons also be able to kill people without using fire breath. So what I discovered was birds of prey will actually use their talons to stomp their prey to death. And I thought, if that was a dragon doing that to a person, how much would that fuck up the writer, like in their head? And so I kind of did that. Like this dragon kills somebody in that way, and the writer is traumatized from that because battle is traumatizing. And so there's like small elements of horror from just from battle alone in that. And I would argue that horror could be in every genre in certain if applied appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
But
That's brilliant.
Did you have the dragons pick people up and drop them too?
I don't remember. I remember mainly that I believe that they did, but I mainly remember the gory part where the. Now I know I said earlier that gore can create like a cheap angle, but this isn't like horror. This is just showing you like war is very visceral and real, and the person who witnesses this has been craving battle for a long time, and she hates that she hasn't had a chance to be a combat veteran, and she realizes what being a combat veteran means firsthand. And I would say that the benefit I have to having PTSD is take the I'm able to explain to my audience what that means. And when people see a war vet, they're like, "Oh man, this guy is a badass. He's like this smooth, he's very manly and held back and stoic." Well, what caused that person to be stoic? I mean, before my term in the military, and I was actually very goofy and screwed around all the time. I didn't take anything seriously, and but like it just like it puts a lot of things into perspective for you. And one of my favorite compliments I'm going to toot my own horn for just a second, but one of my favorite compliments I've gotten was someone was praising my ability to portray um, mental trauma. And that really meant a lot to me because I've experienced a lot of it on my own. So if I'm able to portray it in a way that is convincing, then to me that means that I've succeeded to a certain extent as a writer. And yeah, to back to your point, I do like to. It also makes it difficult to sell them because they could be difficult to pinpoint the target audience. That's the other thing. I spoke to somebody recently who used to do a lot of marketing in New York City, and he was very close to like how the marketing animal works, especially with books. And he told me that one of the reasons why this game doesn't work for a lot of writers is because you want to write this really interesting niche story that's new. You know what people don't like? New. They want to read the same dribble they've read for years and years. I work at a library, and there's people who come in and they, as soon as they finish reading James Patterson, for God knows why, they go through and they read it all again, and they don't read anybody besides James Patterson. That's why one of the reasons why James Patterson works is all of his books are the same book. No one wants that. It's about, okay, what's your target audience? How can we make that target audience wider?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now give me your elevator pitch as to what you can do to make money off of this really wide target audience. And that's why you see the same crap come out of New York Times and stuff like that. Is you see more or less of the same same books over and over again.
I've got this
And
this
it,
painting.
that's what makes it difficult as an indie author. You're like, you guys, I have this unique, interesting story that I've worked really hard on, and I spent a lot of time and money on making sure that it's been perfected.
Yep.
And it sucks because unfortunately the wider audience doesn't really want that. In the horror writing, in the horror community, there's a lot of people who read horror who read just Stephen King, and that to me is a loss because there's so many good horror writers out there that aren't Stephen King. And but what gives a person more comfort is the familiar. And even if you're reading horror, the comfort there is that you know who the person is who's writing it, so you more or less know what to expect.
Yep.
And
I've ended up
it's
with,
really hard to market yourself as somebody who wants to, break the mold a little bit. That's what's tricky about it. You guys are probably dealing with someone who wants commissions for like the most basic artwork that you would see in any hotel lobby.
I've got
Like that's what people want for the most part.
my unicorn
And-
printing is the one that has sold the most every year. I sell out of it every year, and I have
What is it?
my unicorn. It's just a unicorn with a rainbow and it's not even just kids. It's just people want something that they know.
Yep.
And my Mario one sold out. I'm doing a Zelda one now that I assume is going to sell well, but it's not my usual stuff. It's not what I would prefer. So I completely understand what you're saying.
Don't lose yourself in that, man, because
Too late.
you're gonna realize your art goes through a filter, and it's heartbreaking. But it's good to do from a marketing point of view because they'll just be like, it's not Matt's art, it's just Legend of Zelda.
Well, that's
Like-
why I do my own spin on it when I do that, and then I find what probably happens to you as well, Joe, is you'll write something like Vacation Planet, and then a game like Cyberpunk comes out, and people recognize it and they want it, and they'll demand a sequel from you, and then you'll write the sequel, people love it, and then now you're working on a third book. But once people start to read, like, they see your name on these books, they're like, oh, wait, he's done this book and this one and this one. They might branch out. They might try because now you're marketing yourself to them instead.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed that happen where I've had things come up that, like, they'll buy my work just because they want to support me, and then they'll buy my work because they bought the unicorn last year. And they'll be like, oh, I'll buy one of these space paintings this year, or I'll buy this one this year, or that one that year, and it'll just come out to get return customers, I guess.
Who is Richard Bachman and who is Joe Hill?
I don't know
Can
if
you
you're.
ans- Can you guys answer?
Stephen King and Joe Hill is Stephen King's son.
Yeah, but the point is, we know that, right?
Yeah.
It becomes like we know that that's early Stephen King or that's Stephen King's son. Like they make this point to be like dissociate themselves, but at the same time, it became a great marketing thing where it was like, oh, now we're kind of in a special club.
Well, it's
Like not everybody knows this. Now we found the secret underground stuff. Everybody knows it now, but for a while you can imagine, oh my God, all those Richard Bachman books are Stephen King. Holy shit. And now I want to go get those, or I have one, or I'm going to like, it did this cross-pollination of kind of like we all do now. Like it's, I'm CP of the Dreamers Arcade, and there's Space Viking of the Planetary System, go fuck yourself. And we've created Rise in Mind, but they keep branching out and be like, oh, dude, I used to watch those guys when they just did a stupid podcast, and that's when I met that Joe Slater guy. It's like it's all an extended universe. Like, and if you choose to withhold pieces, eventually, like it all gets out. Like you could be releasing books under 3 different names and selling them as 3 different writers, and then one day you just market it all together. It's
Joe, I wanted to ask you some more questions
weird.
too before we're gonna have to wrap up here pretty soon. But I wanted to. What do you mean? So I just want to put something into perspective for CP here and some of our viewers. We're trying to work
for me.
We're trying to work on getting this down to an hour and a half recording time. And
No, you didn't say
I
that
did.
today.
I said that. No,
We have a guest.
I'm trying to do that every day.
He goes, we have 3 segments that are half-hour piece, but it's gonna go super long. Don't worry, I'll edit those segments out.
Yeah, I'm gonna be spending 7 hours editing.
But that's what you told us to do at the beginning of the show.
Right.
Matt,
Well,
you fucked up,
what I'm
buddy.
saying
You
is,
fucked up, buddy. You gave me specific directions. Don't gaslight me, motherfucker. Sorry, Joe. You don't need to see mom and dad fight.
no, we're not fighting. The
No, I
perspective.
know.
Don't make me choose.
No,
But I'm very specific to the instructions that I'm given.
Well,
I'm a bit militant that way.
So Matt, with 5
specific,
minutes left, what was your question?
specific to the instruction is an hour instead of half an hour.
But didn't he say that, Joe?
I did. I said
Didn't he say,
we're
like,
gonna run longer,
It
but
goes about an hour. He goes, "There's a half-hour segment and a half," which we didn't keep up with at all.
I did tell.
And
I
he's like,
did.
but
I did tell
just
Joe.
talk.
I did tell
He-
Joe that
he-
it's gonna
he
be.
did mention
I
that,
did say it's
but
gonna be a 4.
without,
I said.
you know,
I told Joe it's gonna be a 4-hour recording time. I told Joe to set aside 4 hours for it. So I know what happens, but this is all besides the point. I was just about to say that the whole point of the deep dive is for us to get into like the nitty-gritty of it.
We did that, right?
We did.
I feel like I touched on all the bases.
But
with
we got so far into the nitty-gritty of it, we're getting into marketing. We're talking we're talking about audience, and I don't think we've even mentioned
the important thing to keep track of, though, like to be aware of, anyways.
My brain is broken.
What happened with what Jack Crow said about vulnerabilities and fears. I wanted to ask Joe, what invulnerabilities or fears led to Janie?
Something happening to my kids, ultimately. My biggest fear is something happening to my kids, and I think it kind of stemmed from that. It actually stemmed from I got the first idea. I quoted my daughter. That's the first sentence in the book. I quoted my oldest. Because my wife and I noticed an old rundown building, and without getting into, I'm going to try to glaze over this as much as I can, but the living situation that my older two had with my ex before I got custody of them, she would live in condemned buildings with pedophiles and things like that. And my wife and I were making a comment about, I bet you know who would love to live in that building. It's like this old shitty ass shack in Augusta, and it was across the street from the Denny's. And we thought we were speaking in code.
Oh man, I know exactly where that is.
And my wife and I were like, speaking in code, and my oldest saw straight through it, and which kind of like, we kind of kept it to a simmer after that. But my wife's like, which building? And Storm says, it's the blue one. And it was a really sad moment of realization for me. And I said, all I could think of was like this it like popped up in my head. Like I imagined this character living in an actual condemned building that is that building. And like, what kind of person lives there? What kind of person has kids there? What kind of life do those kids have? And so it kind of spawned this idea about Janie and what Janie would be like, and what kind of lifestyle that would be. And how tough of a kid are you to live in a situation like that? What kind of situations would that prepare you for? And so by creating the Conscious Sanctum, I provided, the environment that kid would probably thrive in after living in such conditions. In the beginning of that book, Janie is raising her own sister because her own mother doesn't take care of her, and she lives in a house that's fallen apart, and the grass is all overgrown, and it's just an abandoned building essentially. And so I started, for me, my biggest insecurities is, ultimately what happens what happens to my kids is that's like the biggest fear that I have, is something bad happening to them. And I guess that is, the most clear cut way that I can answer that without going into too much detail. But essentially, my um yeah, it was my way of expressing those feelings. Like, everybody is, without, everyone's probably heard this before, but everyone is going through something. And I'm able to see, because I have a pretty good bullshit detector. I will hang out with like I'll meet Matt at a con, and I'm hanging out with Matt, and I'm like, "How's things going, man?" And he's like, "Oh, it's pretty good." And then he has like this lost look, and I'm like, "Dude, you're so full of crap.
That's
Like,
Matt
you need me
every
to buy
time
you
you
a
see
pizza
him.
or something?" Like I see you.
Yeah.
So I'm aware that everyone's going through something, and to follow back up with, wrap around with the theme of your podcast this morning. Even nice guys are going through something. If I would argue that nice guys go through more because they hold more back, and
Very true.
you have these jackasses that yell at you in traffic or whatever. That's the last time they think about you. But you hold back on it, and that person yells at you in traffic. You carry that with you all day. That's on your
Or
mind
for
all
the
the
rest
time.
of your life, like me, unfortunately. I don't
Remember
know
the
how to
time I
let
cut
go
someone
of
off
stuff.
and they yelled at me? That person doesn't know who the hell you are, but you remember that moment.
I probably still remember their license plate because I said it over and over in my head. I go, when they're pulled over on the side of the road, I'm gonna Phil Collins their ass. I'm gonna just drive on by. I know you, buddy. You're a
Yeah.
scumbag. Yeah.
But I just think that we all go through something, and I know that you guys have bigger fears. And what happens is, with art, is it's a form of expression. And I think if people really want to get to know me and who I am and what my biggest fears are, I think checking out my books is like the best way to see how a person thinks. Looking at CP's art, like, I know that he's really into like retro things. And even without knowing that he likes the arcade stuff, I knew that seeing his artwork, pop culture and things like that, he holds those things in a higher regard. And that's his way of expressing, an age where he felt like things were simpler and more comfortable to him. That's the vibe I get. The the invaders art piece that you traded for the copy of Janie.
That's right.
That's still one of my most prized possessions. I love that. It's right next to my bed. So when I get up in the morning, I see
Oh,
that
cool.
and a sketch that Bob Takasa gave me of Splinter one time.
So
And
good.
That's a very special piece. That was something that I remember that now, that existed with me for a while. And for a while, I was sentimental about it, and I didn't want to even sell it. Like, I just had it around. But then as I got selling stuff, it became this piece that sometimes wouldn't even get put out. Like, I didn't know where I stood with it a lot, because it was just part of an old connection that I had. And then I remember, like, that trade with you. It was like, that's such a perfect piece, because it is like the early days of CP. Like, I even signed it with the CP sketch. Now it's just the CP. And yeah, maybe that's going to be the super valuable one someday. We'll see, man. But it's valuable now because it just has this rich history, and it connected us. And it makes me feel good to know that, like, that's part of your life. Like, it brings you a certain level of joy, because it could just be carrying around in the bins with me still, and I love to know that it's just out there helping people. And like you said with your writing, you get your feelings out, you put them in a thing, and they become a form of art or entertainment for somebody else. Stephen King said in some interview I watched. I know a lot about King just because we did a whole downtown theme a couple years ago, and I watched a lot of interviews. And he said, like, they're like, "Oh, you must have crazy dreams." the audience is always corny. He's like, no, I write them down and give them to you. Hey, and he plays into that weird, mysterious like writer nerd. But yeah, that's the idea, is to get out your human expression, to leave something to your audience or people way after your death. And I tip my hat to you that you are so diligent with wanting to get work out there all the time, because yeah, we don't know how long we have, and maybe you're writing something that you're like, oh, it's another kind of this, or just another cyberpunk story. But but it's good for you, because it's not like, you are living now, you have a story to tell, and it's great that you're telling it in so many different ways for other people to enjoy.
I appreciate that. I think the important thing to, when you feel like you're a lot of people like to rely on a lack of inspiration. Inspiration only comes around once a year on a good day. What it is you have to make inspiration come to you. Sitting down at the desk and actually willing it into existence. If it's shit, then yeah, just call it what it is. It's shit. But at the end of the day, if you do that enough times and you get into practice of it, you will teach inspiration to come to you. It will come to you if you give yourself space in your head to do so. That's why I'm able to write so many times and so often, is because I say, you know what, I have this idea. And the way that you decide on, I have a lot of projects in the works, but you have to ask yourself another question before you sit down and do it, is, if I died tomorrow, what is at least one more thing that I can give the world before I'm gone? What is that one, what is that one thing I can strive for to get accomplished? And for me, this year, that project, I'm so being pretty secretive about the project, but I'm working on a project for NaNoWriMo this year, and I asked myself, if I only ever wrote one more book, what would that book be? And that's a question I've been asking myself since I wrote In the Sky. When I was writing In the Sky, I said, I want to have at least one book that my kids can pick up and kind of see. I kind of base the characters very loosely off of my kids, and they can read that, after I'm long gone and dead. They're going to be able to see that and see themselves as those characters, and that makes that live longer than me. And I think it's important that if you're an artist of any caliber, of any style, of any medium of art, it's important to take that moment and not take advantage of it. I believe that at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want. If you have the drive to sit down and binge watch one TV show for a whole day, maybe into the night, then that's what you're going to be. That's how you'll be remembered. What do you want to be remembered as? Do you want to be that guy who knew all the pop culture references? Or do you want to be that guy who has so much artwork that, years down the road, there will be descendants of some kind who will pick it up and say, 6 generations after you're dead and gone, there will be some footprint of your existence. There are so many people, too many people, that I know that spend their entire lives living and dying into obscurity. Sure, that's fine, but what are you leaving behind when you do that? With people who are farmers who aren't particularly artistic, their legacy is passing that farm down to the next person below them, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And providing food, or let's say like you live in Presque Isle and you're a potato farmer, those potatoes are going to be feeding a lot of hungry families, and you're contributing. And I think it's important that we contribute how we can. For me, my way of contributing is with my art form, which is writing. I believe that it's important to take what you know how to do and use it for a purpose that will last longer than you. My dad has been a metalsmith his whole life, and when he's gone, he's going to have this legacy of these beautiful art pieces that he's done with his metal shop. And when I'm gone, I want to be able to leave behind a stack of books that people can find generations after I'm gone, maybe even at the local library, and say, like, man, I want to read more by this person because I want to show heart and rawness in everything that you do. Because, tomorrow any of us could be hit in traffic by a truck. It's, what if tomorrow doesn't come? What if it doesn't? What if tonight is the last night that you spend breathing and having your heart moving? What do you have to leave behind? What is your contribution to the generations below you? And these are questions I ask myself. I don't want to stop. I know.
Joe.
I proved to myself the first time I wrote a book that I have no excuses anymore. I wrote that first book and published it and said, I have no excuse not to publish anymore. Before then, it was, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Well, you've already got shit out there now, man. What's stopping you from putting more out there?
Joe, you're touching on my actual fear, like things that actually scare me. Like, I can watch someone get their head chopped off, and like you touched on, like how like you'll actually get really angry at kids getting hurt in movies and in stories, and then you touched on what actually scares you, and then like the psychological fears that in the moment psychological fears, but I love hearing that response when someone asks, like, "What are you afraid of?" Oh, dying alone. What are you afraid of? Oh, dying without having accomplished anything, without realizing my true purpose. That's the actual fear that I have, like in real life.
Yeah, me too.
Yep.
Like
the benefit that we have.
We're gonna sit on it too long.
Yeah. The benefit that we have as the generation that we are is we have the benefit of knowing that we can get our artwork out there. It's not just, it's not with paints and pastels and it stays in storage in an attic in a random location. We are able to share that art with other people. And that's the benefit that we have. And I think it's our job as artists to take advantage of that benefit. Now, I went on a little bit of a rant about not having my artwork known. I was always the kind of kid that had to show off his macaroni art. So for me, it's not even about, how much money I make off the project. It's if I'm able to take someone out of their shitty existence to enjoy a good read, I'm happy to be that person, even if I don't know about it. And when I'm gone, I want someone to find a chest in an attic somewhere of like 50 books that I'd written. And I think that would be, even if I wasn't there to witness it, I think, descendants of me will be able to look on look up some kind of ancestry thing, and they'll see that like 2 grandfathers ago, they had a grandfather who wrote a ton of books. And now, without me even being there to know it, I'm connecting with someone who's, 100 years younger than me. Even after I'm dead and gone, people can enjoy my art, and that's what makes art so timeless. It's not only a capsule of that moment in time, it is a capsule of who you were as a human being. And we owe it to ourselves to contribute if we can. There's millions of people in the world who don't have that opportunity, and we have opportunities as artists, and we have the resources and all of that to share it. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind.
What I love about the written word, maybe we can transfer ideas into someone's brain. It's a magical ability. It's almost like a privilege.
Wizardry, man. It's complete wizardry.
Yeah, I think it's I think we and I ranted about this last time, but it's not about sitting down and thinking, oh man, I have to work on this project and I have all this to catch up on, and I have a con coming up and I need new work for that. Don't think about that. Think about, making a difference right now, even if no one sees it. And you need to be excited about it. You can't just get pissed off because art is another job for you. At some point, it wasn't a job for you. At some point in time, you were this kid full of aspirations and wanted to have these big, cool art projects and be the adult that childhood you would be proud of. And I think that that ultimately is what drives me to write so many books, at least one a year. I I want 12-year-old me to see adult me be something that I've always wanted to be, but just couldn't be. And you owe it to yourself and you owe it to 12-year-old you to be the adult who you've always wanted to be. I mean, you started somewhere. Everyone starts somewhere. But move past that start. Move and be that person that you've always wanted to be, especially with your art. If you have the opportunity to create that art, then do it. And it's
You got to do it.
debilitating. It's debilitating to me to see people who start. For me, I'm pretty heavily engrossed with the writing community, so I'll just use that as my example. I see so many people start projects and hem and haw about, oh, I had a project I was going to write once, so fucking do
But
it.
yeah, but
Do it. Even if it's trash, hire an editor, and the editor will help you make it less trash. Okay, like you can't edit what's not there, and the clock is ticking. That's what ultimately comes down to. The clock is ticking, and don't let all these distractions come in your mind. And that's easier said than done. But what you need to keep in mind is, like you could be doing this thing, so do it.
Mhm.
And I won't stay on the soapbox for too much longer, but I
No,
think you need to love
it's
what you do.
inspiring. That's inspiring, man. I liked hearing it. Like, get off, get up off your ass. Like,
All
you
three of
know,
us are going to be dead someday. What are we leaving behind?
yeah, no, it's apparent. Yeah, as time goes on and on and on, it's like there's a certain desperation that does kick in, or maybe you just stay blindsided by whatever. But there, wait till you're 10 years older. Like, not to put the age thing into it, but like,
Or
no,
even
that's the thing.
so you don't want to be that person who in 10 years wishes 10 years ago you did a certain thing. You need to live every single time you apply yourself to your work, do it in a way that you 10 years ago would be proud of. That's what you need to keep track of. It's look at yourself as I personally believe that if we were immortal, we would be much less artistic people. We would have less drive to accomplish something.
Did you ever
I
see
think,
What We Do in the Shadows, like the movie or the show or whatever?
yeah,
The movie's great because you've got this vampire band that they've been together for like hundreds of years, and then when they play music and do stuff, it's terrible. It's like, wouldn't you be really good at like doing this? But they're so lazy because of their vanity and stuff. They don't even know how to play the instruments, and it's terrible. And they're all playing different types of instruments and
yeah,
inspired by different things. Well, it's like what Joe was saying. It's just if we were immortal, we'd probably be lazier. The fact that there is a timeline that's completely ticking on, um, it gives us a certain finite ending. It's like, when is it going to end? We're not going to live. If we
you need
did,
to
we'd
be
be lazier
yeah,
and be binging
you
shows and
need
not
to be
actually practicing.
you need to be competitive with yourself.
Yeah.
uh, I believe that competition, even internally, can really be a driving force on whether or not you accomplish a task.
I'm okay with it
It's what gets us
internally.
out of bed, and it's more than just going, oh, I'll get a paycheck. Because as artists, we're not guaranteed a paycheck. Everyone here knows that, and it's not about the paycheck at that point. If you're doing this stuff for a paycheck, you're doing it for all of the wrong reasons. You need to be in competition with yourself. If you aren't, like, it's sad because I feel like, for example, in NaNoWriMo, which is not National Novel Writing Month, and Matt already put the link in the chat.
Yeah.
It is your chance to prove to yourself that you can do something. And I know it's not a popular opinion, and it'll probably get me in a lot of trouble, but I believe that when I don't accomplish NaNoWriMo, I've failed at something. I want to have this driving force inside me so that I can look at it in hindsight and say, I did not fail it. I completed my task. Even if the book isn't finished writing, I made that novel length with it. And I don't think it is I don't think it's productive to tell people that they're a winner even if they didn't, win by the parameters of the competition. I believe that opens a door to something that gives you excuses. And I don't want you to have given yourself that excuse that excuses you from, well, first, let me put it into this way. If you can give yourself an excuse not to write a book that year, you can excuse yourself from pretty much everything else after that. This is your chance to show to the world on the record that you can write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've written a book before, me personally, I have no fucking excuse. I've written several books, and I sometimes stay up until 1, 2 in the morning just so I can get it done, but I do get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And if you miss just that one opportunity to show to yourself what you're capable of, you're going to go the rest of your life wondering, what if I pushed just a little harder? Was my fight really in it? Was my heart in that? You need to show yourself that you have that inner competition. Like with you guys, so if you see another artist and you say to yourself, excuse me, if you see another artist and you feel that they are better than you, tell yourself that you can beat that. You can be that. You have a different style, but you can accomplish more than that. Like with the whole mural thing, sure, there are people who have these other ideas, but I know I can do something that's not so on the nose. I can make something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And as artists, you can see all the framework to what the person was thinking when they made certain decisions doing that. That's what I do as a writer. When I read a book, being a writer has kind of ruined me reading books because I can read a book and go, oh, I can see why this author made this decision. I don't really agree with the way that was structured, like that kind of thing. And you have to tell yourself, I can do better than this. And when you do your own work, you need to constantly one-up yourself. If you're not one-upping yourself, you're not challenging yourself. If you're not challenging yourself, then who else are you going to challenge with your work?
Yeah, that's a big one.
What's really important is the pride that you take in it. You can't lose the feeling that you had when you first started this. We all started doing this for a reason, and it wasn't because you were trying to be popular. It was because you saw something somewhere that made you say, that is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is a clear vision of what I want, and that's what I want to do. It's easy as adults to get tied up into all of this crap that comes our way, and all of these like kids are a great example. If you have kids, it's really easy to throw an excuse out there and say, well, I can't because I have a kids thing happening. Well, during NaNoWriMo, even if I'm at all my kids stuff, my kids go to bed around 9 o'clock at night. That gives me from 9 until midnight to write that amount of time. You need to have that drive. You need to say to yourself, this isn't just a job. This is something that 12-year-old me made a decision to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it is your call whether or not you want to be successful with that. You need to be pushing for that every single day. And especially, you need to want to be a winner. Don't give yourself excuses, because an excuse is going to open a door to a way out, and you don't want a way out. Why the fuck would you want a way out when you've spent all these years honing your craft, and now you want to give up on it? You want to look at it like it's a chore. You want to look at it like it's another task that you need to accomplish before the day ends. You want to be excited for it. You want to sit down and say, I fucking love this shit, and I want to do the best I can be at this. Be your own champion. Dude.
I wanted that fucking feral cat to be a snuggly bastard. Now he's a big, thick boy. See that? You see that shit?
Yeah.
He still doesn't snuggle on my lap. But
Nope.
it's what you're saying, man. You can make your own reality if you. And that son of a bitch, man, was a pain in the ass to calm down.
That cat
But
will snuggle you.
but it will if you
Will.
really want to work at it.
Well, like Joe's touching on some stuff that like I'm sorry for getting frustrated about the time.
You'll
There's
be all right.
no, there's
It's just
there's
it's
just
a
so
micro
much,
detail.
there's so much pressure. Like I want to win at everything I do, and I'm starting to realize that this podcast is something. It's just another thing that I'm just trying. I'm just trying so many things, and just hoping something's gonna be the thing. But it's the wrong mindset. It's always been the wrong mindset. You asked the question of like, you got to be excited for it, and I'm starting to realize I never was. The only reason I ever did art was because it was the only thing that I excelled at over everything else, and I'm still in that mindset of like, this is the only thing I'm good at, so I'm just gonna keep doing it, and hopefully it makes me some money, or it makes me happy, or it makes me something. But I've never really done it because I wanted to. I've only done it because it was the only thing that I could do or felt I could do. That's why I'm trying the podcast thing. But I'm realizing how much pressure I'm putting on myself for it.
Well,
To make
initially
it
with
like real.
writing, I was doing a lot of artwork. I was trying to draw comic book stuff, and I the reason why I got so into writing is because it was the first thing that I was doing that I felt like I could actually see myself getting better at. I didn't have that feeling with artwork. I felt like, once I know that this rule for grammar exists, I know that I can make the next one better. And it did get better. And I didn't exactly have the most positive reinforcements for it. I had my shit ripped up and thrown in my face all the time, especially as a teenager getting into this stuff.
Someone actually do that
Hang
to
out
you?
with people.
Like, for real? Like someone actually ripped it up in your face?
No, this is way back in the early days of the internet, and I
Oh.
was on a forum site that was called Writers and Friends, and I've written a whole blog about this, and the blog basically covers. I believe that everyone needs an Ann Wilkes. Ann Wilkes is the character from Misery who traps the author at her house. I believe everyone needs her. I think we all need her internally. I think we all need to sit down and work on our project and say, am I really trying the hardest that I can try with this? Am I really doing my best, or am I just following muscle memory?
That's where I came to that
Once
realization.
you start relying on muscle
Great.
memory, your work will never get better. And
I guess I have like a dozen of those motherfuckers in my head.
So
I got a
many.
lot of Anns.
Got so many pieces that I've worked on simply because I knew I could, and I knew I could do it. I knew it would sell. But you're very right about the pushing yourself and not like preventing the plateauing. Like getting trapped in a plateau is like another one of my biggest fears, is that like every now and then I'll surprise myself and be like, oh good, I haven't. I'll be like a sigh of relief, like, oh my god, I haven't plateaued yet. Thank God. But then there's like so many times when I'll fear it because I'll have a string of paintings or work that isn't, it just isn't hitting the mark, and I'm like, this just feels so. The word I think fits is like pedestrian. I'll have a lot of work that comes out that it just feels like I'm just going through the motions, and what you said really struck home. Like I do want to challenge myself more. I think that's why I started the comic. But I do suffer from a been there, done that feeling, where it's like, oh, I put out an issue. I put out a prologue.
Good enough.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did the thing.
I feel that.
But people actually like it. And I love the story, and I want to see the story seen through to the end. But then I'll sit down to work on it, and my brain will go, "You did this already." Like, no, I didn't do this issue already, and it'll go, "No, you already did this. Why aren't you trying something new?"
I had to fight similar thoughts when I was writing the Vacation Planet Hunters in the Rain.
Yeah.
It was literally a sequel to the first book, and I had to push myself really hard writing that one because I had the same feeling. I felt like I had done it already, and it wasn't about doing it better at that point. It was keeping it consistent with this story because it had been several years since I'd written the first one, and you need to maintain a certain voice when you write a second book in a series. You don't want it to look like it's been written by two different people.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Damn, yeah.
so when you're doing, that's why I like doing standalones. When you do a new standalone, you can be a entirely different voice that you want it to be in. And whenever I'm writing a new book, I say, you know, if it's not related to something I've written prior to that, I have to tell myself that this is going to be written better than anything else I had done before. A little bit, I'll open up a little bit about when I was writing Beggars of Elysium in chapter 16. So I had written characters before that like die and things like that, and you know, you feel a little bit sad, especially if you've invested yourself in these characters for so long, and you're spending hundreds of hours working on these projects. There was in chapter 16 when I wrote chapter 16 in Beggars of Elysium, I felt I had actual tears running down my face when I wrote that chapter. I touched on such a personal level to myself writing that, and I explored one of my deepest fears doing it, which is something happening to my kids.
Mhm.
I wrote it in such a raw and real way that when I was done writing it, I had to like wipe my face up. And I will be honest with you, I've been writing for at least a couple of decades, and I've never had an experience like that before. I'm not asking you guys to cry while you're working on your projects, but I am asking you to try harder and bring as much to the table as you can. Try to top everything you've ever done before. When I wrote that chapter, I finished writing that chapter and I said, if I never publish again, this is the book I want to publish.
Good.
Hell
And I
yeah, brother.
Hell
that
yeah.
question every single time I write a book.
That's
I need to
That's
say to
awesome.
myself, this, if I never write again, if I become crippled or I injure myself or lose a finger, I need to know that I have done the best that I can leading up to this point. When you're dead, when I die, I want people to, a lot of times you'll find a lot of books and music and you say, you know, I like the earlier shit better.
Yeah.
Don't be that person.
yeah.
When the new stuff you create, make it the best thing you've ever done. Make people say, yeah, sure, his earlier work was really good, but that last book, man, he really hit it home.
Mhm.
I think it's important that we keep that in mind when we're working on these projects. We owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our audiences to continue to do better with these projects.
I think a
And
lot of
we-
creators will go through ups and downs.
We owe it to each other too. Like that's one thing that gets caught in like the echo chamber that people don't realize. Like keep people in your community, your friends that value you as artists, but also won't be like, look, you know, this is you're not really invested in this. And it's not because we are criticizing the entertainment. It's just knowing people, like helping your friends, like stay on their path, because it's easy to get caught up in other things where it's like, oh, I could be doing this, I could be making more money with this. But it's like, no, unless you're constantly keeping yourself entertained, and what's the point? Who you're making it for? Like, you know, it's your life. Like, live it to the maximum and represent that life, and everything else is just like you said, it's bonus on top of it. But and if your friends start to see you slipping, it's good to have that support, be it positive or sometimes negative, where it's like, bro, I don't know, man. I think you're getting in some other shit, and you know, it's important. And so, Matt, by that respect, you don't have to worry about being an artist that plateaus. Just keep hanging out with, you know, old Joe and CP, and we'll make sure you're not doing boring shit. Especially me, dude. I'll be like, oh, dude, you've been drawing that same fucking picture a lot, man. Let's move
Single
ahead.
unicorns, Matt.
Move it along.
Yeah, well, he's like, the fucking unicorns make me money. I know, dude. I've been. Man, kids love this shit.
Kids love that shit. So,
But guys, I gotta piss again.
a
We're gonna wrap this
that was
thing
a
up. We're gonna take another break.
we can wrap it
This is
up.
gonna be a three-parter. Grabbing my wiener almost over here.
No, it's the no, it's the.
I drank like 3 of these coffees, dude.
I just want to bring it back to the main subject a bit. That was a great breath of fresh air, though. That was fantastic for like just get your shit together.
Get it together.
Put it in a bag.
Be the person that 12-year-old you wouldn't want to kick his ass.
Yeah.
Here, trade out.
That's like one of the greatest fears.
becoming a new
It's funny
version
that
of
we're
you.
talking about horror and writing horror and like getting to like the basic human fears. It's just funny that that does touch on like one of my biggest fears still. Hello, Emily. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to the end of the show.
Yeah.
CP just tapped you out at the end of the show.
I'm a home wrecker. What can I say?
So this is CP's wife. We call her Absolutely here on Twitch. You're a musician. You've been
am.
on the show in passing here and there. Eventually we'll do a full interview with you because you seem to be available on Saturday mornings.
And
I am.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
Have you met Joe at the convention?
I have met Joe before.
Have you met Joe?
Yeah,
Yep.
I have. I also don't have much of a voice because I was sick all.
Oh dang. Well, I hope you feel
This
better
is like-
soon.
I actually do feel better. It's just my voice is gone.
Oh, good. I'm glad you feel
Sick,
better.
so.
But what's your biggest fear? Like horror genre type fear. Abso.
Oh, torture porn.
Oh
Hate it.
Jesus, yeah, torturous stuff. Wasn't the new one of the new 007 movies back when they first brought on Daniel Craig had this like torture scene that was just like it felt unnecessary.
They hit him in the balls with the knot of a rope.
Exactly. That was the one that I
Yeah.
was like, I don't want to watch that. Like, it's-
Yeah.
The reason why that felt so out of place was because beforehand, James Bond would share some banter with the bad guy. And that scene, it wasn't like a banter back and forth thing. It was him just getting his ass kicked.
yeah.
And this is the first time we've actually seen James Bond, like, down.
Yeah.
And I kept kicking him when he was down. And that's why it felt so jarring.
Kind of broke the mythos.
And it's
Yeah.
funny that like I don't really like the torture stuff as much because I do watch a lot of like, historical dramas, and there's a lot of stuff like that in there. But even then, I'm gonna go walk away during the scene.
Okay. You can just walk away. Don't need to watch. Don't need to see that.
Not gonna watch someone get their fingernails out.
But, Matt, I want to thank you for having me on the show again.
No, it's.
I've been looking forward to it for a couple of weeks now.
I'm glad you
and,
were just for some behind the scenes stuff for our viewers. I woke up a little bit later than I intended. I got a text from Joe. Being like, I'm already in the voice chat. I'm like, huh? Like half asleep. Like he's already in the voice chat. I look in Discord. He's just sitting in there. And he sent an image of you alone in the Discord, like in front of your desk. And I'm like, oh, I gotta wake up. Like, he's so excited. He's so excited to come on the show. And then I ended up texting my lady friend and be like, man, the person I'm interviewing today is so pumped. He's already in the voice chat. So I ran out to get coffee and I quickly jumped in the voice chat like, hey, I see you in here. Hi. I'm going to the store. So I'm so glad you were like that excited to come on the show. Definitely going to have you on again at some point too. Hopefully the next time we are on the show, we can talk more about an actual like straight up writing or creating sort of subject. Just because it's close to Halloween, I did want to touch on the purely horror stuff.
Mhm.
But I do love that you dug right into the breath of fresh air aspect, and sort of got people like a message to send, which is something I'm really passionate about myself. So I'm really glad that you touched on that too. That just if you're a creator and you're creating something, don't half-ass it. For real.
You need to push yourself constantly. What kind of person are you if you just kind of coast along this whole time? Or like if you get guys like you and CP and they coast along with the same muscle memory they've had since like 2 years ago, all your artwork is going to look exactly the same. No one's going to be excited to see what else comes out anymore.
A ship without a rudder.
Yeah. I think it's important to continue to
Exactly.
create something and challenge yourself more and more with each project you do. It's more than just art is bigger than us.
Hmm.
And when we're gone, that's what's going to be left behind. Like that's it. That's what there is. And if you don't leave something better and behind, then it's only what's that say about you generations down the line? I'm thinking long-term stuff. Like if you don't try harder and harder with each project you make, like that's your legacy. That legacy is someone who didn't try very hard. They just kind of coasted along. Is that the legacy you want to have?
Oh.
Are you gonna
No.
be the person that got off their ass and actually got something done with it?
I want my legacy to be
Put on
Uh,
those glasses and go.
that guy there was always in outer space. Was never actually on Earth.
I'd believe that.
that's part of it.
That's you,
Alrighty,
buddy.
those of you who are in the Space Viking Discord, all these links that I shared are going to be in the Rise and Mind links on there. We have first up Joe's Amazon list if you want to purchase any of his books. And then if you do want
Two of them are on Audible.
Yep. If you want to,
Purchase
that would
Joe.
be Vacation Planet and Vacation Planet Hunters in the Rain are both on Audible, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I wrote a song. I wrote a
it.
song. I wrote a song for one of those books. I don't know if you know. I haven't read it yet. But Hunters in the Rain. Yeah, yeah. You ever heard that?
No.
I'll make sure that at the end of book 3, I'll just have that audio clip play at the end.
Yeah, that's the outro.
Mhm.
Hunters in the Rain. See, I got your back, man.
I'm really happy that you like the book too, Matt. I haven't gotten any feedback on book 2 yet, so I'm
good.
happy to hear that.
That's got to be tough as a writer, like, you know, just like not getting feedback so quickly. I've experienced that with other people where they say like it's hard to get, you know, people. They're creative friends. We're all busy, you know.
You release it, and then it's just silence, and then you start to like create your own stories in your own mind. Like there's from a more personal aspect, it's not necessarily just creators or creations that receive this too, but like I'll have a story build up in my mind over time, and then someone will tell me something that shatters it completely, and it's like shocking because I hadn't received any word from that person about this particular subject. And then suddenly it's like, oh, the real story now is coming out, and I've created this whole negative story in my head that was completely false.
Yeah, it's tough to have original ideas because like we're all just pulling from the same kind of groupings of inspirations and whatnot. But I think it is back to what Joe said. Like you have to be your own inspiration. You have to be your own best friend, really. Like
at the end of the day, no one's going to make that book for you. No one's going to write that for you. No one's going to create that art for you. No one's going to do the mural for you.
Yep.
No one's going to do all of that for you. You have to stand up for yourself. You have to be there for yourself.
And if we were all to create a Dig Dug inspired fan fiction that's much in the vein of, you know, what we're doing here with Rise and Mind, and what would it be like for us individually? Like, would it deal with themes that are genuine and true to your experience? Like, I want to write about social class and people being isolated and then dealing with their own kind of demons below, and that's me. Yours might be completely different, but if I'm writing something that's just ingrained in the reference or the lore, then who cares? Like, you're just rewriting the same story that someone else did. Like, know who you are as a person. And I think, speaking with Joe, he definitely has this understanding of what he values and what is upsetting, and writing these things that are very true and realistic, where he could just write some Stranger Things kind of clone. I know when you look at this and you see the art, it's like, it's really good because I think of Upside Down, and I think of something that is contemporary, that I can reference to get me glued to it, but it's not. I bet it's nothing like those stories, but you have to have something that's familiar to pull you in, something that's general, but then where do you take it as the creative person? And that's what I would encourage you, Matt, to think of too, when you're caught up in these, well, I want to do this or I want to do that. I live that life too, and it's very conflicting, and all you have to do is go, well, what's the intention of it? Like, how do I want to connect with people? What would have been like? What would have been important for little Matt to read about?
Part of my whole.
If you never created again, what would you create then?
Yeah, if this is you got one shot. I want to put friggin' Eminem underneath everything Joe says. That doom doom doom. If you only had one shot, he's, like we could definitely montage that.
We do talk a lot about the everyman aspect of the working man aspect of this, the working person. That I do struggle with my day job completely saps me of all creative energy sometimes, and I worry
I
that
call it to you.
I'm worried that I'm becoming that job. It's like, okay, I'm not really an artist anymore. I'm a housing resource navigator. That's all I am now. That's all I'm ever going to be. I'm going to collect my retirement. I'm going to retire and play shuffleboard until I die. Whatever, right? There's times when that fear creeps in of like, I don't have energy to be both. I have to pick one. And everyone's got different energy levels, so it's like there
When I
might.
was a stay-at-home dad, I experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, I am just a cab driver. I am just the waiter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't actually like have my own personality anymore. I've just kind of lost it in just doing dad stuff all the time. And then as soon as I usually write my novels in November and July, and November came around, I thought to myself, this is when I wrote In the Sky. I said, if I'm dad, and like my whole personality is like, dad, then I'm just gonna write about that. Like, I'm gonna show my kids how much I actually know them.
Yeah.
And I did. I based 3 characters off of my older kids, and they read it and they're like, dude, that's me. I didn't do that, but that's totally something I would have done.
You write what you know. Like,
Yeah,
it's a famous
it's accurate
quote.
too. Yeah, it has to be truthful from your voice and your perspective. That's admirable. Like, that's what you want to do, and that's the audience you're trying to reach.
That's where my book kind of got its biggest sort of message that I'm trying to send is, if you feel subjugated and pushed down by society and discriminated against, then that's your chance to either become the better person or take a violent turn. And that's like where I like the writing what you know came in for me, is that I've seen people who become incredibly violent when they feel subjugated, or I've seen people who become incredibly peaceful and try to change the world around them.
Martin and Malcolm, dude.
Ah, interesting.
They were, if you ever watch Spike Lee's movie Do the Right Thing, it's confusing to a lot of people from different perspectives. Old white boomers have seen it and they're like, I thought that movie was whatever, and it was like, no, you're missing the point. Like, there's options when you see injustice. You can either handle them like Martin Luther King did, try to be positive, have a dream, or you can be like Malcolm and be like, no, dude, the right thing to do is to smash some shit. because that's what gets people's attention. And you're dealing with this character that is dealing with a conflicting ideology of like, do I meet people with love or do I smash shit? Like, and then at the end it shows a picture of those two men shaking hands, and it's like, well, that's the thing. They may have been like completely opposite, but they had the same direction. And there is going to be a Charles Xavier and a Magneto in this scenario, and you guys are aligned in that fight. But your voice is going to be the unique perspective of where you fall under those ideologies, and maybe you can't figure it out at this point because you're dealing with a world that's ever evolving and changing, and not much like that world at all.
Yep. Yeah. So,
So you figure know the sound of your own voice.
I think that does sort of bring it all the way back to the horror stuff as well. Is that we also write what we know, and we use our own voice when it comes to our fears as well. Like a lot of I've seen a lot of horror creators are like all the stories are so vastly different, and I feel like it's because we all fear different things as well, and the way that we fear things.
And fear is a general subject that like is subjective. So like you write things in such a way it can be very accessible to a larger audience. It's a powerful thing to write around. And I would also say, sure, there's stuff that's individual and based in trauma, but Joe and I have a unique commonality, and you're not too far off the border of things. We're from New England all collectively together, but Maine specifically. I don't know if you've realized this in your life and travels. Not only are we the home of like Stephen King and things like that, the kind of generic name, we're a big horror place. Like we are a state that appreciates the culture of horror movies, slashers, things like that. And it's like, well, why? And it's like, what appeals to not only an individual but a whole state? Like, what is the underlying message that we're connecting to as Maine? And so I'd say, like, not only are we the individuals, recognize that you're a society.
Is it
Vasily
isolation?
Kandinsky, huh?
Is it the isolation?
I mean, we could have a giant conversation on
Yeah,
why
that could take up another
Mainers.
hour of time just
I
talking
could
about
take up a whole day. But I'm just thinking like we are individuals as a person, and we represent something, whatever that may be. But we're also a larger culture. We're also in a regional area and dealing with people that are dealing with post-traumatic stress, whether it's from military involvement or abuse in your family. You know, it it is resonating in different ways throughout different experience, but the PTSD connects a larger society as a whole. And one of the artists that, alongside Kirchner, it was a German expressionist, Vasily Kandinsky, wrote about what's the job of an artist, or I generally, for information, I lump artist, painter, writer, actor, like as a whole.
Like, what is an artist responsible for creating,
Well,
doing?
There's a genuineness of the human experience, but there's also another sub level to that where Kandinsky wrote about, well, what cultures do you identify with? And in this case, we have the commonality here. We're talking about horror. So like Joe is saying, knowing how to market that, knowing where that audience is, it gets into that larger world. But just understanding where we are as a person, where we are as a people, and that's probably a specific prescribed culture. And then what is significant as the entirety of the time we live, whether 60, 80 years. What do you think is going to be the thing that gets put in the history book right now? And it's pretty obvious, like, 9/11, right? Things like that. All these events, the change in technology. We have a unique narrative that we're all living that people will want to hear about when you're talking about what happened where were you when this event happened? People aren't alive now in these events.
Is that the artist's job to recount history properly, or?
Well, that's what Kandinsky would say it's about representing your individual,
Yeah.
the
Well, so-
societal drive, but also recognizing the uniqueness of the history you're living through.
But-
Acknowledging the arcade culture,
I want to
hip hop
pose.
being 50 years old.
I want to pose the
They're
question to Joe though.
Holy shit.
Of like Joe, what if you were to write a horror story in the guise of trying to send a message or like commit to the job of an artist in this day and age, like what would you focus on as an event or an ideology?
Well, I know you mean like significant events like 9/11, like that kind of thing.
anything, any of those.
Or an ideology that came from it.
My kids are the COVID generation, and I think that they're all going to talk about when they have their own kids someday. They're going to talk about what it was like to be a kid during COVID, and how insane all of the adults were, and how much shit the world lost over it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that it would be. I mean, I personally don't think I would write anything COVID related because by the time COVID was lenient on the restrictions again, I was so sick of hearing the word COVID. I just don't think I ever want to write anything about it and live in that universe again.
Yeah.
But I believe that it would be easy to create a scenario where someone's life got significantly worse because of it. I mean, a lot of businesses lost, a lot of small businesses were shut down. A lot of people, I saw firsthand. I'll give you a small story. I won't take up too much of the time, but when I was doing pest control, I did I paid a visit, just to keep up with mouse traps and crap like that at a nursing home. And at this nursing home, there was an old woman who was on her deathbed, and her family had to say goodbye to her through the fucking window of her room from outside.
Wow.
I can't even imagine that. I saw that and my heart just melted because that's fucking awful to say goodbye to your mom through a goddamn window. You know what I mean? And there are millions of stories like that. And I think it would be really-
Christopher Daniel Gay is a person that I think of. And rapper Sage Francis wrote this story that was like the Ballad of Christopher Daniel Gay, and it was about this guy who broke out of prison 3 times because his parents were dying every time.
I heard about him.
Yeah, and then he didn't get to his mother the last time. He died like a football field away or something like that. And he didn't get, and think about like poverty and crime and stuff. That's a great example of a unique experience that somebody went through it's horrible. Like you put these in stories, like what is it like to not be able to say goodbye to your parents because of imprisonment or COVID has separated people. In my case, I put my cat down during it and I couldn't go into the vet office. So they brought him back out and but then he had to go away. And it was like, there were things that fell into place that it is disruptive. It's like, oh, in a different time, I could have done this. Or people that missed out on momentous occasions like milestone events and birthdays, graduations. Yep. It has this impact. So it is an important thing that you can write into your work and talk about hitting the nail on the head. A lot of what the Dreamers Arcade is imagining the world after the pandemic and how the pandemic exacerbates certain situations and enhances the flow of technology and changes that direction. So I'm going to use a lot of contemporary history without actually pinpointing the 2020 experience. So by the time it comes out, I'm hoping within the 10 years of its development, it then resonates with a generation that grew up as kids during it. And then It's like, well, what did this middle-aged man deal with and how did it change his life? And what sense of urgency did it put on him and then change the communities that they live in? Because you're going to be frozen in a timeline. Mm-hmm. And remember that when you're writing about 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina or wars in Afghanistan or the collapse of the housing market, or all of these things are not unique to our time, but they are unique to a human experience. But they are also unique specifically if we're going to be in the history books in some certain way with our art. I'll agree with Kandinsky and say it's important to be genuine to yourself, genuine to the culture that you live in, whether it's poor people, soldiers, whatever that is, to represent that voice, but then also to say, like, what did we live through today and how can we recontextualize way without COVID-19 happens, you know?
Yeah.
I think what matters is writing what's most important to you at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
And people are going
necessarily
to
relating
vibe
back
with
to
that.
it. Like, not necessarily relating back to it.
I'm
But
tired of explain. I love stuff
Yeah.
that wasn't explained. Like now we have to explain everything. I don't think we have to do that. I think
I
leaving some gray area for imagination was the reason that I'm an artist.
I
Because
tried
of
to
this simple
yeah,
shit, you know?
I try to go out of my way to keep um, specific real events out of my writing as much as I can because of how dated it will actually make your writing. So if I had written a book about uh, something that was inflammatory in like 2016, like with Trump versus Clinton running for president, that's going to be dated by the as soon as like they announce who's the president, your book is now dated, and 10-20 years that's going to be jarring. It's going to pull the reader out of the immersion by saying, like, let's go back to what I was saying earlier. Like generations from now, someone will pick up my book, and if I'm ranting about Trump versus Clinton, it's going to break that immersion because they won't really know the context of it because political things move the way technology moves. It's so quick, and like these things that feel so intense and so important at that time are going to be irrelevant by the end of the next year.
true.
Yep.
Like, whatever your stance is on it, it's going to make your writing more juvenile looking. It's going to date your writing. It's going to do all kinds of things. It's going to break the immersion. So even if you do know about those things, it'll piss you off because you'll go on a mental tangent about something that was inflammatory about that. So immediately you've lost it. So that's why I try to keep, if I can, I try to keep current events out of my writing if I can.
Usually a pretty good.
I think
Sorry.
That is just my opinion on it. I mean, there's millions of people out there. Well, not millions, but there's lots of people out there that make a lot of money off of talking about current events. I'm not one of them. I like to write fiction, and my job with my fiction is to give you an escape from those current events. If I'm constantly bringing them up, it's going to break you right out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to make projects that are more timeless in the sense that you can look back at it and still enjoy it, even But I think if you really want to get a feel for something that captures the time or the era, just watch movies.
Yeah.
That tells you everything you need to know about that era.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, movies in the 80s are significantly different than they were in the 50s. Significantly different than how they make them today.
Yeah.
2010s even compared to movies made in the 2020s. Huge
That's
difference.
what was so
So
interesting
that's
about the whole Avengers franchise, because when they first started and then to the most recent ones, you can almost see the gradation of difference over the course of time.
I feel like it turned into a soulless cash grab, but that's just my
No, it,
thoughts.
it did. The first phase
no, I agree with
leading
that.
up to the first Avengers
Who cares,
movie
right?
was fantastic.
Yes, the peasants will buy this movie. Yes.
Yes. Bread. What is it? Bread and circus. I think
I don't
that's
know.
Oh
like
yeah.
to sort of bring it full circle. I think my whole thing when it comes to being an artist and what do I want to leave behind is I don't want to be a part of the bread and circus. I want to provide something to people that lifts them up and doesn't distract. I don't want to distract from things. I don't want to distract anybody. I want people to be lifted up. I want people to rise in mind.
I think
Yeah,
that's a good
dude.
final note because it's past 1 o'clock now.
Oh, geez, yeah. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show with us again. Sorry we lost the first recording, but I'm so glad that you could make some time for us, and
I will always make time to come by for your show.
Always fun time. And we'll get you on a topic too. Like maybe you can come back soon and we can talk about Halloween that
maybe.
have a horror theme. Whatever we want to do.
Yep.
Or maybe in November
That sounds good.
we'll talk more about National Writing Month during November if you'd like.
Oh yeah, I'd like to participate in that. Maybe you could kick that off and tell me like where's a good place to start, and I could shoot.
I would love to give pep talks on NaNoWriMo. There are so many people out there that are involved with it, but don't really. I personally feel like a lot of people in charge of NaNoWriMo don't really throw a drive into it because everyone's a winner even if you try, and I think that's just. I honestly think that's kind of bullshit. I think you really need to try.
I had a personal experience with that. Is like they didn't even question me when I said, "Oh yeah, 50,000 words. I'll just throw that. I'll throw my 42,000 words in there, and then I'll write the rest for the rest of the month." And it didn't even question that. I'm like, "Yeah, I've written this amount, but I didn't do it during the month." And like, how do they track that? And then I got my little win badge. And I'm like, I don't even feel good about this win badge because I didn't actually write the whole entire story.
You felt like you didn't earn it
during the month. Yeah, I was like, that's kind of silly of them to build it that way.
Yeah. If I have to, I will upload a weekly motivational video if I have to.
Yep.
If that's what it takes to help people win NaNoWriMo.
That'd be awesome.
You only got one shot. Do not miss your chance to Joe.
It's just a constant re-upload of Eminem.
The Mom Spaghetti song?
Yep.
I can't remember what it's actually called. What is it called? What is that song?
It's called Lose Yourself. It's now Mom Spaghetti.
I just keep re-uploading Lose Yourself. They're like, oh, what's the weekly video going to be from Joe this time? Just plays Lose Yourself. Oh, okay.
So guys, those of you who are still watching us, thank you so much for hanging out. I know we went a bit longer than usual, but I wanted to make sure we covered everything here with Joe. Joe did take time out of his week, even taking work off to be with us. So huge thanks. Thank you, dude.
I called out of work today.
I appreciate it.
Fuck yeah, dude. I'm sick. I shit my pants.
I don't hit him with that bullshit. I'm just like, yeah, I'm not going to be there in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And they just go with that because
I appreciate you doing the betterment thing, coming on and championing, I guess if that's a word, people to write and to encourage that stuff. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having you as a little personal coach in the background of November to be like, all right, CP, write your shit, buddy. Coming on with that Lose Yourself.
When you make friends with people on NaNoWriMo's website and you can see what their word count is.
Yeah, that's
man, I'm like a fucking animal when it comes to that. I see someone else's word count, I'm like, dude, I'm gonna kick their ass today.
It's like a high score. Like, oh, you think that's a fucking score, dude?
Yep.
I just got a hypomania state. What?
That's how it feels. Yep. It's exactly how it feels. I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm only 300 words behind that. I'm gonna shut up.
There was so much good content here today that this is going to be a two-parter on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Hell yeah,
but I don't want to cut anything. This was all amazing. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So we're just gonna wrap it up here. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Joe, once again, thank you for being on. CP, thank you as always.
Thank you for having me.
We currently can't raid out of this channel because we're not an affiliate.
So give us
yet.
a follow, help us out. Follow us if you're lurking in the chat. Follow our social medias, Discord, all that stuff. Get us so we can raid, get our fucking fun emotes, big drills coming in. We appreciate you guys hanging out. We had quite a few of you lurking and chatting, so that was cool. But as always, I hope you got something out of this. We dug deep and we've resurfaced, and our minds may have, but we're not in that rocky prison anymore. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
And I look forward to reading Janie this week, getting some input from a real writer's point of view when I'm putting my shit together. Make me feel a little bit better moving forward, having that support. So that's cool, man. Thank you,
Yeah.
Matt.
Alrighty, guys.